Yo, how's it going, folks? Welcome to episode 145 of the Simpa Life Podcast. I'm proud. That's the first time my hand-eye coordination has actually got that out in this combination of 1-4 whatevers. So that clearly means I'm under-caffeinated for everyone that keeps commenting on my fucking things, saying I should drink less caffeine. I know, I'm aware. We're recording this a bit earlier in the day, so I haven't had time to drink a metric ton of coffee. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation. We've got a returning guest, guys. As I said, there's a few people this year. We've ended up having to break into parts 1 and 2 for various reasons. This is the first returning guest. We're going to have Dr. Callie Seaman returning very soon with the synthetics episode. And later on in the year, we'll have Dan Hera back, hopefully to discuss some of the things that we didn't get a chance to in previous recordings. I'm not going to waffle on about the weather because I'm warm today. It's sunny. It's fucking lovely. I'm not going to say its name because I'm scared that it'll go away. And if I record this well and edit it, I might get outside to play today.
Yeah.
So hope you're enjoying some sun wherever you are in this wonderful world, folks. I am aware I have a global audience, and some of you people live in Spain and in beautiful California, and you guys don't know what weather is. It's water falls from the sky. There's these dark things called clouds that come over and it gets really cold and there's wind. It's like the fan that keeps you cool, but from the sky. Horrible. Anyway, yeah, we're going to waffle too much shit because I want to jump straight into today's guest, who is a Canadian stand-up comedian who is currently residing in beautiful Devon, all the way down in the south of England. They're a former TV co-host who's performed alongside many amazing acts around the world. They are Craig Campbell. How are you doing, brother?
Yeah, very well. Thank you. Thanks for having me on again. Appreciate it.
No, I like it. I think for my audio listeners, you might not be aware of the precarious position that Craig appears to be sat in. He is wearing trousers or shorts. I'd just like to say that for YouTube and the censors out there.
I'm delivering a bum baby.
Anything is possible these days, brother. So yeah, I do hope you have sufficient care, warm towels and hot water. That's the only things that I know from common media that you need around you. But yeah. We've had Jordan on the podcast a couple of months ago on episode 134. So yeah, about 11 episodes ago. And it's not that long of a period, but what have you been up to during that time, brother?
No, and I just once again commend your workload. You're cooking, that's so many guests, and that's all energy on your part. So congratulations. I've been up to I'm in prep mode, I'm in I've got a number of projects that are coming to fruition that involve my acting skills, which is kind of what I have always expected would happen, but it's taken a long time to come to fruition, Simpa, in terms of I used to have sort of conflict to some degree regularly with casting agents, just because when you come from a stand-up personality point of view, almost like when we were talking offline about the character of Hicks, and don't for a moment think that I'm so delusional that I'm comparing myself to Bill Hicks. Please don't assume that's my intention here. But but imagine again, it's a bit obtuse, but imagine if Bill Hicks was going in. Of course, he never would, because it was entirely against his ethos, and I'm even embarrassed to admit that it's not against my own, to go in and do an audition for a part in a sitcom or whatever. I always had that I didn't have the profile or the confidence of a Bill Hicks, but I'd always be my stand-up. Do you want me? Why am I here? And then sometimes it would even actually come to that, Simpa. I actually had a breakdown of where, people are you haven't put much effort into it, kind of thing. And I'm just that's because I'm not going to put any effort into it unless you want me for the part. I'm not going to study lines. I'm not going to get this little, vignette that you've chosen for me, my audition piece down pat, because I'm actually a busy guy, and it may not seem like much to you, but I got a show in Edinburgh tomorrow and another one at Belfast on the weekend, and then I'm in Hull, and I don't even know how I'm getting there, and I have a life outside of this, and I'm not really that interested in you unless you're really interested in me, and sometimes it would it would break down to they're just essentially they're just you have a massive ego, and even again we talked about before being on online, just Yeah. Like, yeah, that's exactly what's going on. Unabashedly, unapologetically, a gargantuan ego. I have to crawl on stage in some of the most like trying environments and be expected to be at least like 80% minimum of my best, or literally the chatter in the industry and everyone around me who I depend upon for for income will talk about how I've lost it, how I'm no longer funny, how I've got no, bones anymore, whatever you want to say about it. So that's the stand-up pressure. They don't care if you couldn't find a parking space, Simpa. They don't give it, an F if you didn't sleep last night or for what reason you didn't sleep last night. They care that they hired you and you're there and you have to be your best. And it's just like that takes a lot of like that stand up in a nutshell. There's like no, there's no nights off. There's nights off, but there's no night off when the lights are on you and the camera's rolling. And particularly now when you're just like filmed everywhere you go, whether it's the front row doing it or whether it's the house doing it or whether it's your own people doing it, you're literally like on trial every like second that you're wandering onto a stage under the pretenses that you think you're funny. And so I've expected that, like, where is it just that like all the people I've worked with in my career, where are they just not finally just calling and saying, hey, Craig, we've got this great part, you're the neighbor, it's as mental as that story you tell about your the beer bear story that you do in New Zealand. That's what I was kind of thinking of when I wrote it. Can you do any accents, because he's kind of this like crazy guy that blah blah ladka gravis, think taxi, blah blah blah, just like that's what I've always thought would happen. And of course, I'm like pushing, I'm not, but like let's say I'm pushing 60. I'm, as you get older, you think you're pushing numbers higher than you are. As you're younger, you think you're younger than you are. But I think I'm older than I am. And finally, like literally finally got a message from Instagram, like private messages, hey, get in touch. I got to talk to you. And it's just like, I got lots of buddies who get in touch and got to talk to me. And then I got in touch and I was like, yeah, we're doing a show. I want you to exec produce on it. I want you to be a floating character on it. It's a sketch comedy. It's a spoof news program. Awesome. Basically, are you in? Just like, this is what I've always done. This is what I'm talking about, baby. This is it. Yeah, you know me. I've had you on my shows and you know what I do. And you're doing a show and now I'm doing it. And that's like, so I've basically been going over, lines, getting my characters down pat, doing weekly meetings to basically, see where the production is headed. We've got a studio that wants to do it. It's a wonderful, like very modern collaboration in that when we're on a Zoom call with like 9 of us, one's in Florida, the other's in New Brunswick. There's a couple in Alberta. I'm the only European English component. Mm-hmm. So it's just like that, working collaboration with the technology that we have right now. And the potential once it's off the ground to tour in particularly Canada, but also North America on the back of it. So what I've always wanted, Simpa, just that kind of dovetailing into the next project. I've done a lot of projects, mainly in the UK, but started, sort of up until the mid 90s in Canada. And then there's been, just this utter brain tumor of the last 3-4 years in terms of production, particularly in terms of live performance and production, how they confluence with each other. So it feels like it's finally, the wheels are turning again. And of course, as you'd, and I'm sure many of your viewers would be happy to know, it's awake as F. It's like that next, because I've always had this like most recent problem where I'll be hired for projects because they want an awake comedian, but like I don't really work in front of just awake people because I'm still talking about them. and not in flattering ways. So I make pains about this, on my social media often. I almost rather people who are in a effing coma, Simpa. I'd rather people that are just completely not even on the radar of having a clue than people who like literally woke up in the last 3 years and now are acting like they're awake. Because like if you woke up in the last 3 years, let me like tell you without any, mincing of words, you're an infant. You are still in a coma, literally. Like if it took 20 plus years after the utter like overt BS of 911 for you to pull your head out of your rectum to realize what was going on the planet. Like literally, if suddenly that's like presented to me as, look, Craig, your comedy audience. It's just like, no, 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 no. These people are literally gonna, you see how my hair is pulled back in a ponytail right now? Yeah, well, they're not gonna need a ponytail because the look on their face, and I know it, Simpa. Again, I know how they react, and they're, just, oh, that was a bit offside, just like I know how people are like responding to my lack of sensitivity about talking about them, like it's not overtly hilarious, but like one example was I get into like sort of a bit of deep water with audiences that are, seeming like they're a bit reticent to get on board with like how awake I consider myself to be. And again, like as we spoke earlier and a little bit at the beginning of this, like it's arrogant to say you're awake. And I recognize that. But at the same time, like I've been being screamed at in public places by literally dead asleep people in front of others, like others who like on the fringes of it haven't supported me. People are like calling me baby killer and all kinds of shit. And like in public areas, at festivals, around campfires. Oh, you don't vax your kids. You're an anti-vaxxer. Look at this anti-vaxxer here among us, this threat to our children and his own children. And these are the kind of people that I've like had to deal with. Well, like literally people are sticking their head out of their tents and, just kind of anti-vaxxers taking shit. Good, luckily, he deserves it. Yeah, they should all be on trial. They should be in jail. Yeah, they should have their kids taken away from them. Like literally that's the common paradigm that I've had to deal with. So this idea that like those people who are among that population who suddenly now like suddenly wake up to the fact, because whatever, like 30 of their friends are dead or half of the people they worked with are dead, or just because they decided to make a decision for themselves, they were excommunicated from their work or exculpated from their family life or whatever, suddenly think that like we're buddies now, that we're on some like team bus together. It's really hard for me to stomach. But regardless, I'm in this sort of whatever I'd said to them that put them on their heels. I was just like, okay, this again is why I don't like doing these shows, because I'm told that you're all awake, and then I actually start to talk about things that are like pretty awake, and everybody here is like, oh, it's great, we just woke up, go easy on us, put some spin on it before you jam it in, everyone's got that kind of attitude. And for one was like I'm already like I've always been anti like since the time I was sort of early 20s and really awakening, learning about the HPV vaccine in the late 90s, and the utter widespread murder and desecration of particularly young girls, but then that like now dovetailing into moving the HPV vaccine into young boys. So this sort of like it's a bit of everyone can admit, if you're awakening, it's an angry process. It's a like I've been lied to, I've been deceived, I've been pushed to harm myself and to harm the people around me. And part of that was like starting to realize that corporate sport wasn't my friend, and then you're having to deal with like all your friends that are like whatever, football fans, hockey fans, and a big one, like a big awakening, I hope, for some Canadians is to realize, although I haven't really met them, that's another thing, Simpa, that's like, I'm not talking to you like I know a whole bunch of people that have awoken that I now communicate with on that level, because like, hopefully like yourself, and I'm assuming again, a lot of your listeners, like newsflash, I didn't lose a lot of friends in the last 4 years of madness because I didn't have any friends who were that stupid, by the way. Like, my friends didn't wake up in the last 4 years. And if they did, I'd be highly suspicious of having them as close friends. I have acquaintances that I'm like not rude to in public, but like the idea that like because of the last 4 years woke a lot of people en masse up doesn't mean that my like friendship circle expanded or my previous friendship circle diminished. Quite the opposite. The same people that like I was very close with for the last like 25 years were basically like, you know, when the time comes, I wink, you're here, we're in the bush, right? Yeah. Like, yeah, you know, you know, people calling me and just saying, hey, we're not far enough in the bush. You know, that place that we set up, so we all got a place to go to. Well, the only thing I regret is we're not deep enough in the bush because the nitwits are still here. They can still reach us. You know, that's the kind of feedback I get from my friends. But regardless, I started to, you know, really drift away from corporate sport. And again, to like reiterate, the fact that like most people wouldn't even know this, but if you look at like easy to search this, the entire NHL roster, all of the hockey players in the National Hockey League, only one of them held out against the jab, for example. So that's like, just to give you an idea of how much, you know, brainwashing has permeated professional sport, and again, particularly targeting like the Canadian public. And you can imagine the one player who held out was prevented from crossing the border to be able to play games. So he couldn't play away games that were in Canada, for example. He was playing on an American team. I believe I think he's got dual citizenship, but that didn't help him regardless. So, you know, but the fact that like the vast majority of fans of that sport took the poison so that they could go to hockey games, that they were allowed into the stadium. That was the case. So you've got like, you know, that going on. People are just like, yeah, I'll do anything to watch. Not even like realizing that all of the players themselves have betrayed like every child that they claim to be a role model for, or are pushed to be role models for. I don't want to put on their shoulders that that's their obligation just because they're, you know, a great hockey player. But, you know, the fact is that's part of the confluence of that, you know, that world. And the fact that just none of them stood up for like the reality that forcing anybody into any medical procedure is literally the reason why people fight wars, is literally why the reason people fight to the death in the shoes they stand in the directions they're facing, because of that type of decision. And the idea that like literally like more than 99% of an entire league of athletes, not one or one of them had the cojones, like, you know, literally one of them had the nuts to do the right thing for like literally for other people and for himself. And so I, you know, again, I made a decision that I didn't like corporate sport many, many years ago based on like different criteria, but like in the same category. Mainly for me, it was the fact that like I could see that, you know, athletes, professional athletes were just show ponies that were being, you know, kind of shifted around like you see them in the Premier League and have no allegiance to their local team. And I felt betrayed. I'm from a, you know, for whatever like local, you know, pride I bought into, which is like, you know, it's ironic. They try and push you as a child and, you know, throughout your life into being a pride-filled person, you know, pride of place. You, wherever you're from, you want to support your local team. But the fact that like, you know, none of the players are from there, or that they don't care about it enough that they won't be from there for long if the price is right and they get to go up the street. And so I just started to realize these guys don't care about my hometown. I drove to the airport to greet them when they won the cup. You know, like I was that guy. I was a teenager. I was in it. You know, that's the other thing, Simpa. Maybe the level of betrayal that I felt because I was like cut and dried in the wool, like, you know, brainwashed, essentially. You know, I believed the government. I believed the news. I believed what the professional players that I was like, you know, trying to emulate in the sports that I played, including basketball and including hockey. And as I got older, realized that like some of those those players were actually like pushing products, and continue to this very day, pushing products that are incredibly detrimental to not just children, but to athletes. You know, the irony of that, the fact that, like, you know, someone like the greatest hockey player ever to live, unequivocally, nobody's going to debate you on that, Wayne Gretzky, is like pushing aspartame-laced cereal products into children, particularly, like, you know, excitotoxins for the brain, like damaging toxins for the brain for children. So, you know, I realized kind of in my early 20s, these aren't good people. This is long before, you know, we're like in the 90s at this point, right? Like, I just thought these are not like quality human beings. And the fact that they're being like touted as like role models for kids is abhorrent. It's like terrifying. So I was already, you know, drifting away. And so you know, for me, making fun of like, you know, sports was an easy thing to do. So there I am, you know, whatever it is, 30 years later in front of an awake audience. And I've, you know, again, said something that's clearly like turned the stomach of half the audience, or, you know, you get a sixth sense when you're a comedian particularly, but any type of performer, you know, you're like, I don't know what I said, but I said something, you know, like suddenly, you know, you start, is this mic on? You realize that they're like reticent to, you know, to support you again. And people can be so tribal as well. They can love you for an hour and then like close, you know, shut you down on the encore, literally, because you said the wrong thing to their sensibilities or whatever. But I started to do, I said, okay, yeah, oh, you're all awake? Okay, let's go into my awake jokes, my specific awake jokes that I wrote for like this crowd. So, hey, how can you tell when a football player, not an American football player, but like, you know, soccer, I'll offend everybody here by saying, you know, the dreaded S word, soccer, when a soccer player isn't faking an injury? Nothing? Okay. When he's dead by jab. just like sat there, literally, you know, turned the place what was already like a pitchforking with you know, resplendent with torches into like a fucking mausoleum, you know, just shut it down. And I'm like, this is why I hate you people. Go home and like actually awaken. And then we can attack your most important tenets of your life. The idea that you like think you're awake, but you still like support football, that you still like, you know,
it's yeah. I'm going to interject at this point because I've got some pretty good rebuttals. I'll just point I want to make it as we go. No, I kind of count myself blessed. The kind of abusive upbringing that I had, and the fact that I was removed from mainstream education, I was put into like care homes and whatever else. And I learned I could see the world very young, and I knew that every adult lied. It wasn't a case of like, do they? It was, are they lying to me now? What are they lying about and why? And then once you can understand that there's two layers, I think the new awakening people that you speak of, they're people who have lived with that duality, the cognitive dissonance and biases that arrive from having, frankly, it's an indoctrination to Pavlovian conditioning through mainstream education. You go into geography, the bell rings, I think about mountains. Bell rings, math, I think about math. It's compartmentalization and breaking down of the way that the brain works. Frankly, it breaks down, what do they call it, neuroplasticity. It's the opposite of what most drugs do in terms of causing neuroplasticity, especially most of the classic entheogens. Tripping over my own tongue here. I do want to comment on so I think, yeah, they're a victim to that kind of mechanism, and they are now shocked to go, oh God, and they're scared to peel back each layer. They've gone one level and they understand there's two things here. They've just announced on the news that, I want to get my numbers here right, I think it's 80 people have died as a consequence of the AstraZeneca vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine. They've now withdrawn that, not just from the UK, but globally. They've put themselves out, AstraZeneca, quotes basically saying that due to oversaturation in the market with other vaccines, we're withdrawing. And so there's a monetary mechanism there. So again, to go back to HPV and the other things, whenever there is a financial incentive, money is going to be made. There's a line from, what's the band? Fucking punk band. Who the hell are they? It's not coming to me. Anyway, this American punk band, and they basically, there was a line in one of their tracks. It was like, when prison is an industry, somebody is getting locked away. And it's the same thing. When medicine is an industry, somebody is getting exploited. There was a guy that stood up for Goldman Sachs. I'm going to get my year wrong here. I'm pretty sure it was 2009. Stood up in front of a conference of investors and went, pharmaceutical investors, and went, we are not in the business of cures. Cures are not conducive to a healthy economy.
Yeah.
And then to go on to the other point of sporting, yeah, you had Novak Djokovic, I believe, was the tennis player who refused, and he obviously missed the Australian Open. Recently came back after the restrictions were lifted, and what did he win or did he get knocked out? I think he got knocked out actually toward the fight, toward the end. But yeah, there is a mechanism there that you don't have to necessarily be pro or anti-vaccine. I stopped at the line of coercion. As soon as I was told on the radio that me being scared of needles, because I'm hyper scared of needles, I've got a needle phobia, registered and everything. I was hesitant, and then one day on the radio, literally the guy was like, you're killing your gran. And I'm like, well, firstly, my gran's dead, thank you. You fuckers killed her from complications of arthritis medications over years that blew out her immune system. We're not going to talk about that. But yeah, once that coercion started coming in, I didn't have to care about what the vaccine was. I looked at and assessed my health, my risk at the time, my likelihood. I followed certain rules for a certain amount of time. We don't technically have, what do they call it, statutes of limitation here in the UK. Oh, actually, we do for summons events. COVID were through courts, so I can admit this. Yeah, fuck it. I violated the lockdowns. I drove down the fucking country. My partner was fucking 300 miles away. I'm not going to not go and spend time with him and be in that bubble. You know, I interpreted the rules as I saw fit. That's exactly what Boris Johnson and the rest of the Tories did. So they were never locked down into these strict rules. What comes to my head, and I mentioned this a lot on the podcast, I should get a little clip to put in. It's in The Simpsons. Homer and Lisa are sat in his car. Homer's had his license removed, I think for drink driving, and he goes to start the car. And Lisa goes, Dad, no, you can't. Your license. And he goes, I'll try it anyway. And the car starts. That's what I feel like these people are like. I can't. They've said I can't. Therefore, I can't. I just can't. And I think so many of them have woken up to that. And like I said, the fear of breaking down that cognitive dissonance and barrier in their brain of going, I should do my own research, but not to then fall into these cult-like things. Because that's the other thing that I think happened of these. I hear this thing of like awoke and awake and walk and all these new school paradigms, but to separate them into those kind of groups of the mainstream neoliberal good capitalist woke person that is just parroting the corporate lines. That's good for, it's going to sound very conspiratorial to people that don't know, and very esoteric, but like ESG scores and the whole investment mechanisms that have been set in place. And I know that sounds like a right-wing talking point, but go away and look at it, please, people. I think it's 22 trillion Aladdin runs now in terms of its value, and that's just one supercomputer at fucking BlackRock. So wait till we start to figure out what everyone else is doing. But yeah, anyway, so they're parroting in part of that thing, and because they're getting rewarded for it, they're getting social media likes, they're getting brought on the news, I mean, I was part of this. It took me a while. I felt co-opted by the move to legalize medical cannabis here in the UK. I hate those words, but legalize medical cannabis, or cannabis on prescription. And I ended up in positions where I was only getting asked these questions, and I was supposed to be there to then champion these ideas. And it wasn't until I then started saying, yeah, but what about the other people? What about the people that don't have the piece of paper? And I think the same thing happened during the sort of the global pandemic here in the UK, is anybody that spoke counter to that narrative had not just all of those incentives removed, but a whole new layer of restrictions applied to them. And like, I was I've lived with being an alternative individual, quite counterculture most of my life. Yeah. But in the first 3 or 4 weeks, man, the pressure from every single angle. There wasn't a single news source. There wasn't a single radio station. Every people getting deleted off Twitter for just mentioning the wrong words. Do you know what I mean? The silence that went through social media and the people that were just vanished overnight was just like, it felt like they were at the door. Do you know what I mean? It felt.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's mental. I think I've commented to most of the things I wanted to there. Sorry,
like a witch hunt, actually a witch hunt.
Well, yeah, because again, it was the distraction. Fear always works. I can't remember the two guys that came up with it. There were two like politician strategists came up with a thing that they kind of worked with Reagan and a few other people since. And I've only just discovered this thing, so I'm not going to comment too much on it until I've done a lot of research into it. But they kind of created this thing of basically, no. All you need to do is just other the opposite.
Yeah.
Politically, just what are they? Be opposite what they are and say that everything that they are is bad, and therefore you become good
Mhm.
because, well, they're the bad guys.
Yeah.
And it's the fucking Goebbels thing, tell a lie, make it grand enough, and repeat it often enough, it becomes the truth.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened in political discourse. You can see that wave of it over the past 30 years across, well, all of Europe. It's
Yeah.
become this populism. It's the strong guy, the outsider who is, no, often as insiders, all the other insiders, but they work for a few years beforehand, positioning themselves. And it's like it's scripted. It feels just all written that you're going to be it's Kifabe. Like, do you know wrestling, Kifabe? If people that don't know, Kifabe is like the facade of wrestling. So the Undertaker was the Undertaker all the way until he retired, and then he could be Bryan again. Do you know what I mean? So if you saw him, he was the Undertaker. He wouldn't acknowledge his name or whatever. He would always be that person. And it feels like that's what's happening. It's the Kifabe of neoliberal capitalism.
Yeah. With revelation of the method thrown in, and you might be talking about Saul Alinsky. That's the sort of blame the other for that.
That might be one of them.
Yeah. That, the implementation of that. There's also, revelation of the method comes from essentially predictive programming, and funny that you would mention the Simpsons along the way, that they've been, uncannily accurate as they go. It's yeah, we're in strange times that way. And I wonder if you find the same as I do, that when alternative voices started to come out, they were few, but I've even, sort of spoken to, if I can be disparaging to, and in as non-disparaging a way as I can be, to I've spoken to normies, like, hey, like the awake and like the woke. I hate to label people similarly to yourself, but that, like, people who just aren't as au fait with alternative terminologies as we might be, that they started to notice. This is recently intimated to me at a get together last weekend. They said that they just started to see that their alternative news sources, or their alternative voices in their life, started to feel constructed. They started to become suspicious of them, just as they had awoken and removed themselves from the mainstream. And I was like, yeah, and I totally feel that personally, that there's a great quote by someone who himself is deemed to be like potentially a state operative, but Robert Anton Wilson of the Illuminati trilogy, and he has a great quote, and I believe it's an Italian mafia quote, but the quote itself is, when four people conspire, three are government agents and one is a fool.
Mm.
And I used to think of that as like a comedic hyperbole. I used to think, what, 75% of people are touched, like, in a group of four? Are you kidding? But now when I look at like alternative news sources, including the ones that people might consider to be like the most revealing, the most revelatory, and the least like controlled, I look at exactly that, Simpa. In fact, I look at it now. If you put 20 of them in a page in front of me, I'd check off 18 of them as like suspect. And I'm hyper vigilant in terms of, and I explained this to the lady I was speaking to wonderfully over a picnic table. Hadn't seen her for a few years, and we were like catching up after all the nonsense. And it reminded me of how I'm more tolerant in like social settings. Again, speaking earlier of like I can be, like, I can socialize with people I don't politically, ideologically concur with on every note, and be polite. I'm not like I'm not fascistic in that way. But when it comes to like my spare time and what I'll infect it with, as far as like alternative media goes, or a podcaster voice, for example, or I basically have like a very low tolerance for like background noise that I don't concur with. And for me, it's little tiny things. Like I mentioned to this lady that I had conflict with what she was talking about, but I was willing to state it politely because she kept referring to like the last 4 years as the COVID years, and I'm just like, hey, just for like, I'll be polite, but just for your knowledge, and I don't wish to like have conflict with you regarding it, but I consider our words very specifically. We started to speak about like the English language as a language of spells, and particularly from the Phoenician, and like the use of like incantations, and that your words breathe life into reality. And so I make pains to make it clear that I don't parrot the official narratives. I don't parrot the voice of the oppressor, and the voice of the oppressor is COVID, because they're in how I interpret the world. Nobody has to agree with it, and either way it matters not to me. But to me, in my interpretation of the world, there are certain tenets, like COVID did not happen. There's no official COVID. There's absolutely nowhere that you can show me on Earth that COVID as a virus exists. Aside from that, you can't show me a virus exists, but you can't show me that COVID as a virus exists, other than in a silico representation given to the Western medicine apparatus by the Chinese Communist Party as a computer model of what COVID is said to be, right? So let's start there. That is like, there is no COVID. There's a computer formula that says it's COVID, but it doesn't concur with anything in the real world that you can show me under a microscope or prove to me in real terms. So I don't call it COVID. I call it like the period where COVID restrictions took place. That you can talk about that. You can say like, what was inflicted upon us or enforced upon us was that period of time. But I'm not going to ever parrot for you that I thought that there was something like sitting on the countertop here, lingering on the lip of my coffee cup about to, oh my God, like they tried to tell us was going on in the cruise ship parked off of Japan, for example, and it lives for 22 days on a stainless steel surface, and
so, I'm just
boogeyman stuff. I don't breathe life into the boogeyman narrative, and that's like all that I can do in my little world. That's all I can do, is not contribute to what I consider to be a myth by my own parroting, like lazily parroting what people believe actually took place. And another big one for me, and I won't digress into this for hours, as like I'm want to, and I can easily do, but the big one for me, and I only mention this one because it has relieved so much anxiety in my life that I think of all the time, like literally every day, and sometimes multiple times in the day, and particularly with kids or in an environment with children, is that I don't believe, because it's never been proven to me, and science has never ever proven it to be, other than to be hijacked by like the medical industrial complex as we know it to be now, and many people have awoken to the reality that it is now, is I do not believe in contagion at all. I do not believe that things go from coffee cups to my lips and then I get like a cold later because someone in the room touched the coffee cup earlier and they had a cold, or they were walking downtown and they touched a doorknob and it happened to have.
What about chicken pox? Sorry, I'm curious as shit, because
there's anomalies within. There's definitely anomalies within, and I don't profess or will even attempt to claim to understand the mechanisms with which chickenpox proliferates. However, I do default to the studies that I know that have been done for cardiopulmonary illnesses, particularly like flus and colds, the ones that are most often promoted to us as like the big fear that is out there, and like the next COVID or the next strain of COVID, or particularly like Spanish flu or N1 bird flu, and all of that like umbrella of diseases. I no longer at all fear in slightest, and that again, I say it's lifted an anxiety off me. And again, like you and I know, again, probably more than most, that the psychosomatic belief is more weighty and important in your real life than what any reality or is out there. So in my own life, and again, I don't push this belief on others, but in my own interpretation of the world and how it works and how I confluence with it, I don't have any worry. Literally, if I'm on a bus, as I, semi-regularly am, I'm not above taking buses and regularly do. If someone sneezes on me, near me, around me, but again, particularly I stress like with kids got snot going on all over the place. Kids are always with other groups of kids covered in snot and you name it, they're not as good at wiping their bums as you and I are.
Kids are always sick though. That's why my sister's got 4 of them and they don't.
Oh, totally. And that's but I do not walk into my child's illness as though I am susceptible or I'm in fear of receiving what they have just because their entire class has it or whatever. And as it comes to the anomalies or the conundrums within my understanding of germ theory or terrain theory as is debated hotly between them, and to somewhat less of a degree, I don't find the debate is as strong as even it was. Certainly it isn't as strong or as stark as it was 5 years ago. But the anomaly of, and it's quite an anomaly just on its own, regardless of how it dovetails into this conversation, how women synchronize their periods when in together. So, this is it steps out of the understanding of our understanding of how we're affected by particularly other people's, personal, physical reality. And that, that is the case. Women, their roommates, 3 of them, 4 of them get together before you know it, they're all, menstruating at the same time. So I only throw that in as it's another anomaly and another conundrum like chickenpox within the confluence of the conversation that is we don't know what's going on there. We don't have any idea. But the idea that just because somebody's got a runny nose and I happen to get a runny nose because, I was living with them or, we whatever hung out for an afternoon, I don't now leap to the conclusion that I caught their illness. I now am much more along the lines of thinking that I have the same level of toxicity of the same toxic elements, whether it's food or environmental or, electromagnetic or all of the toxins that we know exist in our daily shared environments, fumes from cars, diesel particulate, all of these things that our bodies have to eject through our lymph system, through all of our different mechanisms. I now believe that there are probably other phenomena that is taking place that allows us to eject and to detoxify at the same time or in synchronizing with each other. But I don't fear it now, and that's a great thing. When I have to deal with snotty noses now, and I have to deal with particular, as you say, kids are just sick. They're just sick all the time. And another thing is that I deal with my illness, and some of the people around me that I'm most intimate with deal with their illnesses through fasting. And I do that if I'm the slightest, if I have a raspy throat, if I have a runny nose, I immediately go into dry fasting, or as it's called, absolute fasting, because one of the things that I first noticed from my most dramatic and helpful for my physicality, for my for my ailments, I was struck when you mentioned earlier your mother's arthritis. I have extremely severe arthritis as well, and I've been able to.
I've got early onset.
Yeah, and I've made great gains in my own arthritic condition through dry fasting. But one of the things that I most noticed about my most dramatic and earliest phase of my dry fasting, again, it's called absolute fasting, some people call it, but it's no eating or drinking. And most of the people, most people listening to this and most people anecdotally in our societies, and I've run into them when I'm dry fasting to the degree that they even disbelieve that I am doing it, have told me that they think, and again, it's part of our zeitgeist in our societies, that people believe that if you don't drink particularly for 3 days, you die. It's the threes type. People believe that. I've dry fasted now 5 times three times for more than 5 days each time. So I'm in front of you. You can either like think I'm lying to you or feel that I'm being disingenuous for whatever reasons you might think that is. I say this to your listeners. I don't assume that you are, of course, Simpa, but I have I'm one of the people that has not eaten or drank anything for more than 5 days, 3 times within this year, within a year period from as we're speaking now. And I'm very, very much, as you can see, very much alive. But one of the things I first noticed from my first dry fast in August of 23 was that my sinuses cleared up immediately. Like within the first couple of days, my throat had no phlegm in it. My nose was like clean as a whistle when I'd wake up in the morning. I was able to nose breathe easily. And so now, and I've of course read more into it now since that first experience, but now when I start to get the slightest bit ill, I'm immediately into a dry fast. And from August 23, my first like extended dry fast, I've had about 5 what I would call like nascent illnesses start to like develop. And I've literally battered them all, literally just pounded them out with like within 36 hours, usually within a day, but within 36 hours of not eating, not drinking anything. Have a last nourish yourself, have a good nutritious meal, a good balanced meal, have a nice, peppermint tea, and then literally go into fighting that which is attacking you mode. And I've had it not, manifest beyond like 36 hours. So that's, again, not everyone does that, but it's something that, and for me, performing, Simpa, to get back to like crowbar back to comedy, my arthritis symptoms got to the point in August, which is why I did the original dry fast, to be prohibitive from my performing. I was unable. There were like shows that I was doing in 2023 that I was at the end of them. I was in such anguish, literally like feeling like I had a stab in my neck and my shoulder, particularly left side, just like a hot iron stuck in me. And for the first time, performing didn't make it feel better. It seemed to amplify the symptoms, made it feel worse. And then the drive home, or prior to that motorcycle ride home, was so difficult that I realized that I couldn't continue it. I realized I just couldn't. I was like in a free fall. I thought I can't keep doing this. I can't get worse and keep continuing to drive to like 4 hours through the dark night to get. I bounce around, feel like at the end I've had to like tell audiences, particularly in Bournemouth, was the one I'm remembering now, where I just had to tell them like I'm really, I'm basically this guy. I'm in full grimace. I'm like gritting my teeth to be normal. I don't know what mother got to, but like, arthritis is just like an internal fire killing you. And like I couldn't look up. I was driving through the steering wheel hole above the dashboard. I wasn't able to look over the steering wheel because if you want to like see things that way, you have to like kind of raise your ass because you're looking. Your normal head position is this. So if like I want to look up in a up cupboard or something, if I want to look up, I've got to like lay on my back. I wasn't able to like lift my neck now. So I was having to tell audiences, again, in the Bournemouth show, I was just like, you're amazing. And I know you didn't notice through like the 25 minutes I just did here that I was like, I can't do this anymore. As much as I really appreciate that you're a hot crowd and you wouldn't like this probably seems odd to you that you're hearing this from me, but like, I'm just telling you, you're watching the last show I'll ever be able to do in my life because I can't keep doing this, whatever this in me is. And so that was the situation I was in like early 2023. And that's what precipitated my need to do the extended dry fast in August. And then for the first time, and again, this is so crazy, again, to crowbar back into stand-up, that like 30 plus years of my, like literally 32 years of my life, Simpa, performing stand-up, like just like everywhere and all over the place, hours on end at different environments, different varieties of show formats, and all the shows I've done, and all the time in between, I had never ever even considered not having like an energy meal, a banana, a granola bar. As sad as it is that I even thought there was energy in it, a Coca-Cola used to be my go-to pre-show. If I was at a club, if they asked me what I wanted before I went on, can you get me a Coca-Cola? If you got a slice of lemon, that would be unreal. And I would drink it simply because I thought that I actually needed from the Coca-Cola company the energy I didn't realize the glucose roller coaster. I didn't even recognize the arc of my shows being like,
linked to it, yeah.
Like literally like just falling off a table. And so suddenly, like, I've had this health crisis. I've had to tell audiences I'm not even going to be able to perform anymore. And then in August, I do my first ever intervention of my own. I basically I got up the chain within the NHS at the hospital to speak to the surgeons who would have been doing the surgery on what I have. I don't know what your mother's symptoms were, but I have two things sadly on either side of my neck that manifested as paralysis in both arms and numbness through basically paralysis, numbness, and weakness. But they're called stenoses. Some of your audience may be familiar with them, but it's basically, I have through my arthritis extra bone growing all over my body, things called osteophytes or calcifications. And I knew from 2014 when I was first diagnosed with it, that I realized, oh, this is like, I don't know, what your experience was with your mom, and I don't know your own symptoms, that you're pre-arthritic at this point. But I'm sure some of your audience will know that you don't have to be a genius to realize if you got bone growing all over your body extra, that's not going to go to a good place. There's no there's no good future. Oh, you grew some extra bone and it's a birthday present. Lucky you. Yeah. There's no bit of, it's why I have a new hip on my left side, because bone growing where it shouldn't have been. My acetabulum in my previous hip joint was interfering with the femur head and cutting open the soft tissue on the head of the femur and on the acetabulum on the basically the vaginal lips of your hip. So that was being shredded, and you're the bone growing inside you is really bad. So of everyone around me, family wise and friend wise, when I was diagnosed in 2023 with having these stenoses that were causing the paralysis and numbness in my arms and weakness in my arms, it's the funny thing, everyone around me is oh my God, and I'm just yeah, what did you literally, I didn't say this to them because it wasn't against them, but I'm looking in the mirror just saying, what did you think was going to happen, right? When they tell you that you got fins on your vertebrae that shouldn't be there, that was the first thing was noticed by a chiropractor in 2014 was they looked at an MRI that I got done of my hips, thinking that it was my hips at the time. And of course, it wasn't my hips. It was this extra bone growing everywhere. And they were just you got to go to a doctor. I'm not legally allowed to interpret this for you, but I can see that you got some problems going on, buddy. So I've been that guy looking in the mirror for literally 10 years. And when they told me that I had these stenoses in my neck that were weakening my arms, I'm just yeah, of course that's what's going to happen. You can't just have bone growing all over the place and lead it to a good place. So essentially I got up the chain of through about a year of meetings from the head of the head and neck and spine department to the actual surgeons that would be doing the surgery on my neck to free up the interference of my nerves with my bone that are going down both arms, shoulders. And they're just you're just too high risk and we won't do that. So essentially you're looking at painkillers. That's what led me, Simpa, to realizing the only way that I can help myself is to bring down my entire systemic inflammation. The only thing in my favor, I can't take away the bone that's in me that shouldn't be there. And I'm not going to get surgery a bit of me is hoping for, but the other part of me is hoping I never need again, or, never ever need. And so I started to read about fasting, and particularly dry fasting, as a way to get basically get your pre-diabetes state, which most of us are in, down to being like, a normal, what we really should be, a normal person that doesn't have like inflammation everywhere. And that, of course, was because every time I went to do a show, I was asking for a damn Coca-Cola like a freak, and eating sugary foods because I thought it was going to give me an energy boost and just this utter nonsense. And I was brainwashed to hurt myself. And so that's why I mentioned like 33 years of my career, I was using sugar as like the belief that was the energy I needed to perform at like a peak. If I came off the road, if I've been driving for 8 hours to get to a gig, I'd be like, okay, just do you have a banana? Okay, I'll have a banana and a Coca-Cola because I'll be in a crash otherwise. And now, including on this podcast talking to you, and only from like August of 23, and I first realized how beneficial it was in my like most recent tour at the beginning of December. I did like 14 gigs in a row over 16 days through Scotland. Have I been water fasting every time I have a performance to do? Every time I actually need energy and sustained energy throughout the day, like actual, controlled energy, not a roller coaster, but just like sustained, like a wick that's burning. I now, when I wake up, as today, I only drink water. I only drink like liquid. I only drink tea. I only drink like, I don't eat. And that's including on show days, over 16 days, 14 days. In fact, I'm realizing on the day off that I had, I went and did 2 shows in Glasgow because I was invited on the show. So like I had no time off through an entire tour. And every time I had a show, every day of that tour, I only ate after the show. So all the way starving through the day, from the time I wake up until after I get off the stage. And the tour shows were broken into 2 halves with a break in the middle, and I was doing like an hour each half. So like literally like an hour and a half minimum of show each night and I would tell the audiences, Simp, I realized like by day 2, I was like, folks, and I started to think, this must be what like Mick Jagger does. How does a 70, and it must be what Rod Stewart does. How do like 75, 80-year-old dudes, perform all night? Like literally, you think of the Stones, what do they do? Like 3-hour stage shows? How can a guy who's that age be like doing all of his greatest hits? And I realized like 2-3 days into that tour, Simpa, I was just like, this must be what they do. Because I'm talking to you right now. I am electric. I was like, I had to tell audiences like, 3 days into that tour, I would tell them right at the beginning, I'm just like, okay, here's what's going to happen. I am lit like a fucking firecracker right now. I've been doing this fasting thing and I don't know what's going on inside myself, but I haven't had dinner today. I haven't had breakfast. This is the first time I've been talking to people essentially. And just so you know, you need to bring nothing to this show. I don't need your energy at all. You can react to some of what I'm doing, but I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be performing at this pace for like the next 2 hours, regardless of whether you're here or not. I'm not going to diminish the fact that like I appreciate your attendance, but the simple fact is, if you all bugger off, if everyone who walks out of this show, I'm going to be at this same energy level until at least midnight tonight when I have my first meal of the day. So this is where, I'm at. And that essentially, that maintained itself. And bear in mind, Simpa, like read from me that like that tour, that like from the 1st of December to the 16th of December was a massive gamble, because what had taken place before that was I had to tell audiences in places like Bournemouth, I would never be doing another show again in my life, Simpa. It's not even like, it's not like I was like, coming off of doing previous tours regularly. I literally, on day 1 in Scotland, I didn't know if I'd be able to do day 2. I didn't know if I'd be able to finish day 1. I didn't know if I'd be able to, like the show that I'm telling you about in Bournemouth was literally, I was closing and it was like an ensemble bill. So I was doing like 22, 25 minutes. Like I didn't know that I'd be able to do two halves of an hour each at all. And suddenly, like, rather than tell audiences that I'd never be able to perform again, I was telling them that, like, it's taken me 33 damn years to figure out how my body works, how my energy level works, and how my brain works for my performances. I've been poisoning myself for literally 3 decades. And here I am, like nearly an old man before I like dummy up and realized how to actually run my own professional world. It's just madness.
Yeah, well, I think we'll work backwards with the comments that I've got here. This might be a little bit of a diatribe, so I do apologize. I think
Chicken pox.
no, I'm gonna work backwards to that.
All right. All right.
So fasting, yeah, I completely agree. I'm basically a 1 meal a day kind of guy.
Okay.
Generally, that came as a consequence of like the peak of like austerity and unemployment decade ago, and it was I just got into a routine of I actually feel really good. I'll maybe get a hunger pang at like 5, 6, and that is literally my trigger to go. I'll have dinner. Do you know what I mean? And then, so yeah, liquid sort of during the day, but then even only eat in a certain sort of window. And there's a natural kind of acuity, exactly that. I'm so hyper aware of my reality around me. And like I said, because of kind of my youth, I've always been aware of myself and the sort of the way in which those systems interact, as it were. And so, yeah, I've literally, I'm like the pigeon pecking in that experiment. I'll practice and do, for another reference to people who might not get this, that episode of Malcolm in the Middle where Hal is rolling a perfect game and he has to like pull down his zipper and say a tissue and look to the side, and he does all of these behaviors because he thinks that's what's giving him the strike. And that's kind of like there was a study in the UK decades ago as part of like our pre-war stuff, because we wanted to use pigeons as radar to peck when they saw ships. And so what they were doing was trying to learn how, I think it was B.F. Skinner was involved. It was during the birth of behavioralism. Yeah. And so the pigeon would repeat whatever its last random bunch of behaviors were prior to the food source.
Totally.
And so, yeah, I think that mechanism is definitely at play here. So I think that people just are doing what felt good to them the previous day. And with the perversion of our food sources, with the perversion of everything really, by profit as the mechanism, because the cereal company isn't John Kellogg's or whatever his name was back in the day being like, I want to make Kellogg's so people stop masturbating. Real thing. Look it up, folks. We've gone from that to how can we make this the most snackiest, the most like the best mouthfeel, all of these fucking neoliberal Orwellian words to describe addiction that they've got into every facet of food. And like I said, through marketing, like the Olympics, brought to you by Coca-Cola and McDonald's. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? All of these things you say like neurolinguistical programming and everything, that's the system. Most of us are so bathed within that. And unless you have, frankly, either a trauma event, a high-end entheogenic experience, sometimes alcohol can do it. You see people have a mental breakdown, but they're so drunk they can't formulate what it is. But what's happened is the mask has slipped, or a relationship breakup or a death or something that happens that snaps you for a second and you're like, fuck. And we call that shock.
Yeah.
But what you're actually doing is you're seeing the real fucking world. Granted, there's a bit of trauma or whatever that you need to kind of have some support with, but you also need to recognize to stand on your own feet. I'm not one of these people that's like, pull yourselves up by your bootstraps, because that's a bullshit expression that means failure, frankly. It's a co-opted, is it an anatime phrase where the meaning of something switches its meaning over time? So it used to be, you described that in the early 1900s, pull yourself up by your bootstraps was an impossible task. And then it became co-opted by like the mid-century neoliberals to mean like you get yourself out of the gutter. It's like, no, if you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, either you fall over because you've got no legs, or you can't because your weight of you. Do you know what I mean? It's an impossible task.
Yeah. Wow.
And what
and a spell to get back to it breathes an absurdity into reality as a cycle.
Yeah, the language by which we describe things. I remember vividly, I've described this before, me and one of my mates for a year, every Sunday we took acid together. And I remember us one night in the kitchen and we were pointing to my cooker, and the cooker was irrelevant, but it was just the space of where we were like using our mind map almost. We were both tripping as hard, and I'm like, but red. And this is such a cliched thing that everyone's gone over. And he just kind of went, well, what if my red is blue? And we kind of went, well, and everyone's had that like on weed at one level, but we went through that for about 6 or 7 hours, and we ended up in how religions and cults and everything formulates, and how groups will naturally separate and break apart because of the esoteric nature of the language, because of the myth building, because of egos wanting to rise. And I think that's what we saw in I call it the lockdown events, because that's the best thing for it, is that people went, shit, it was me and my bubble, me and my groups, and then the tribes and the way that that's kind of affected us is proving the other things that you were talking about. So the Menses cycle synchronizing. There was a project in the early noughts. I hate how we describe that, between 2000 and 2010, but I can't remember the specific year. The project called Heart Maps.
Okay.
Heart Math. And what they were doing is they were basically studying the electronic energy and the life force, as it were, of various things. And they discovered that human brainwaves interact with yogurt because of the bacteria within it. That they put diodes and measured it together, and they got a guy in the room, and they basically showed this guy like extreme pictures, so he'd have emotional pings, and he was pinging this electrode thing. The energy that he was dissipating out. They found as well heartbeats synchronize. So humans, when we sit together, this is what I always say. I love these conversations, love this. But sitting with somebody, even if I disagree with them, and having a real meaningful conversation, you feel so alive because there is this simpatico, this sympathy, this synchronization. We want to be with each other. That's why, again, like for a comedian, laughter predates linguistics. Mm-hmm. I think Jimmy Carr does a bit on this on one of his old fucking DVDs way years ago. But yeah, we involved laughter way before we had the capability in our brains to formulate a complex language. We could grunt and gesture and show like violence and teeth and claws, yeah. But laughter became such a universal thing, yeah, that it was something terrible would happen that would normally lead to like violence, and everyone laughs. And what used to happen is the guy would laugh as well. Like it was a way to check the ego. You see this still in like, there's an African tribe, and I'm sorry, I'm pulling an anecdote out my ass from a very old book, that when somebody did something wrong in the tribe, what they did is they'd put them in the center of a circle, and everyone would affirm the love for them. Everyone would like tell them, you may feel bad, like, no, everything other than what you did, good. But the one thing, and here's what, and do you know what I mean? And because of that acceptance, they could face it. So rather than internalizing it, which I think is where we're talking about inflammatory diseases and things like this, the stress connection. I can't remember the name of the guy that wrote the book, and he basically figured out the neurological thing that you can think yourself into inflammation, and you can think yourself therefore out of it. Fasting, I think, helps because it's a reduction of energy. Our bodies are, even someone, I'm quite skinny, you know what I mean? But I can go, as I do in the woods, I can live on like 2 porridges or whatever for 3-4 fucking days. Take a lot of drugs, frankly, and a lot of water, but the body is capable of it. And what you're doing there is instead of using all of that energy in the mass to deal with the last meal you ate with all of these complex additives, all of these complex things that keep your food together and on the shelf for an extra 3 months, extra fresh, all these lies of, again, that Orwellian manipulation of language, slows it down in your system, and it builds up and it impacts. And if you're like a meat eater, I think, what is it? 9 pounds? They reckon there's 9 pounds of meat impacting the average colon of a meat. When people go like veggie or whatever, and they lose a dramatic amount, they lose a load of water weight, a load of the mass that's literally clogged up in the spaces. And I think there is this thing of why we were talking about off air, how Bill Hicks died so young from cancer. And if I may borrow this anecdote, you mentioned your grandfather and dying at sort of 69, nearly twice the innings that Hicks had. And you spoke of him, someone's not acknowledging it. Bill joked about it on stage and was like, these things are going to kill me. But what is it like? It's a meat and potatoes, gravy. Sorry, it smells and tastes so shit to you guys, sort of thing. He had that whole thing for it. And I think it is that psychosomatic element that you were speaking of. And I'm doing pretty well. I'm tying all this together. So then to go back to the thing that I'm really curious about is your lack of belief. And I mean this with all sincerity, is respect. I'm not deriving. I have a different opinion. I'm very curious of your own. I think that contagion exists. I think obviously that viruses exist. I think with the COVID thing that, again, I think I told you before we started recording, I had a moment where one morning during, I think it was about week 5 of lockdowns, and BBC Radio 1 in the morning, and this used to come on at my girlfriend's flat, and there were 1 in 4 COVID tests faulty, giving false positives. So then if I add that to what you're saying here, and I steelman that, again, in the Aristotle tradition of holding a belief without holding an idea without making it your belief, that would make so much fucking sense. If 1 in 4, that would give, and if psychosomatic, like you said, as to your anecdote of your belief, that if you're around sick people, go, oh, it's the Family Guy, when Peter plays the office woman who goes, I can't get sick right now. I can't get sick right now. That person makes themselves sick because their fear of the germs. I'm not saying it's all like positive energy and vibes, but there's so many things that contradict each other. And I'm steel man in your position without saying I believe in it, but I think there are things that definitely give credence to it. I'm probably not as well read on the debates because I know there are about sort of germ theory and about this idea of sort of how pathogens move and develop. And yeah, I think there is fuckery. We see that, like I said before, where there is profit to be made, people will fudge and fuck shit up. And again, so my belief in the COVID thing for this is just me airing my belief, YouTube, my personal theory. Don't fucking kill my channel. I think obviously is for all I disagree with him on quite a lot of things, Bill Maher, when he was like, COVID, no, it wasn't Bill Maher, it was fucking Jon Stewart. And he was like, so COVID, yeah, it either came from a zoonotical thing in a bat, was it a wet market, or maybe it was the COVID-19 lab in Wuhan that's called, do you know what I mean? And so I think that makes sense to me. There was a lab that was studying it. They're actually going back to studying it now, which is a terrifying fucking thing. Obviously, that germ acceleration, gain of function has been going on for fucking decades, without going into a whole Nazi Operation Paperclip conversation. It's been going on a long time, folks. But so I think that carelessness could have literally just got out and the spread of it. We know, I mean, again, I really love the 1995 movie, I think it is, Contagion, with Gwyneth Paltrow and Matt Damon. Is it Matt Damon?
No, I
no.
But
but it's
Matthew Broderick, isn't it? Is it Matthew Broderick? Is it? Oh no, it's sorry, it's yeah, no, I know who you're yeah, no, I know.
The second thing I've forgotten today, damn it. But
from Rain Man, the guy from Rain Man, isn't it?
Oh yes, it is. It's in Rain Man. It is
nothing worse than using Rain Man when you can't think of that. Yeah.
Anyway, we can see that anyway. We live in a world where in about 24 hours you can be from Southern Australia across Europe, across North America. You know, things can spread fucking fast. We know of things like the work of Rupert Sheldrake and of morphic resonance, and of things like that in conceptual ideas, and he did a main thing around like crystal formations and the iterations. The first iteration of a new formation takes a long time, but over time, the energy and the amount of time it takes to generate that crystal formation or that natural formation becomes easier over time. And they observed a thing, I think, in the 1950s with blackbirds in the UK, in Europe, in Australia. And basically, within about a week, there's people observing the blackbirds. The birds discovered gold top milk, cream, the thickest cream of the bottles, and they were choosing the gold top milks, and the behavior was then observed. There's many of these other anthropological studies that show that humans have a similar sort of thing. And we see that in the idea of the 100th monkey paradigm, I think they call it, or the 5% rule. Generally, if you get something at 5% in a population, it's an endless acceleration. It will be accepted and normalized until there is then a 5% that rises and replaces.
Yeah. Well, there's a Dustin Hoffman movie about it.
Dustin Hoffman, that's the guy that we were trying to think of.
See, I find that's like the Contagion film is predictive programming, that's part of the revelation of method. That's part of that system. And when you get into, like, for example, the COVID-19 or the lab leak, that to me is also, there's like confluence again with, if a hero is needed, we will provide him. And I consider that to be like a mainstream narrative, and I consider that to be like what is wanted to have happen. You can within the Overton window, you can think that it's either like an escaped virus or a mutating natural virus from a pangolin and to a human, or you can believe it's a lab leak, but you can't believe it doesn't exist at all. See,
and that's the thing that's weird to me. Sorry to interrupt that. That again, I'm not criticizing. I'm not even criticizing. I'm just curious. To me, then, so is it your belief that then what was the lab doing then in this theory? If then they weren't then producing,
I'll dovetail that into saying I also don't believe in nukes, and I also don't believe that NASA goes to space. So when we get into like the actual paradigm of, like, particularly even you look at You look at like, Britain's biological chemical weapons labs, particularly the Yanks. Most people don't know that the one in China was built by the French. The Canadians are very big on this. So you're into like a global mechanism that's creating these like virology labs, or these, essentially they're the proliferation of the American DARPA programs that have been like outsourced to countries where they're not bound by the treaties that the Americans have signed for themselves. And I consider all of those under the umbrella of the same creature, the same criminal, particularly the ones that we know of that have been, found in Ukraine that aren't being talked about in the news or being pushed very often. But I don't believe at all you get into like the levels of them. I think the one in China, again, built by the French, is a level 4 lab. I don't believe that they're containing anything dangerous. I leave you with that, like that everything that they do is trauma-based mind control. Everything that they do is built to instill fear through the media in the public, push agenda. And like, that's literally, there probably are some natural things I think that exist. I think there are like some things that, like you mentioned, chicken pox, there's no like denying. I'm not like to the point of, I was about to call myself insane, but I don't believe myself to be so. I don't believe that it doesn't, that experience doesn't exist for people. But I don't believe that the wide, like once you get into the belief that like the Spanish flu was not a flu, once you get into the understanding, like I'm deep down the rabbit hole of what are called vaccines. And I think about it again when you mention like the vernacular that's used by cults to manipulate, when you get into the sense of how they changed the term vaccine during this most recent thing, right? Of the different terminology changes that they used. So these are the creatures that we're dealing with. I believe that they are their method is fear. Their impetus is control, and their concrete actual like assets are things like nuclear weapons being a big one, viral weapons, biological weapons, chemical weapons are their control apparatus. And I believe that chemical weapons exist. I'm fairly well studied in what took place in the trenches in World War I. Particularly, that we, again, much like concentration camps, were the ones that made them, were the ones that first even posited the potential of them, were the first ones that ever implemented them. It was a Scotsman that first noticed the poison coming out of smokestacks in South Africa and thought, hey, we could probably target that at our enemies. We were the first ones really to do that, the West. So but as far as things like, once I get into like actually looking for viruses, once you get down, like, you could probably ask people to watch the documentary, The End of Germ Theory is a big one. The book that I can't remember at the minute, the title of, written by Beauchamp versus germ theory versus terrain theory. Terrain theory was Beauchamp's, of course. Germ theory was Pasteur's, Louis Pasteur's. Pasteur, on his deathbed, proclaimed that all of his, his viral propositions were fictional, were not founded in science. So that's something that people can look into. And the most basic one that, like, for me, is just to look into, because we are that animal. It's not like, because I'm suspicious of like the mainstream medical complex as it is right now, doesn't mean that I don't think that medicine exists, or that our curiosity in like getting better at medicine exists. But the fact is, like, you can imagine the human animal. Have we tried to prove contagion? Oh, we sure have. So people can go in and look for those studies, know that like they have tried as they might, hell or high water, sparing no expenses to try. Because I mean, obviously, the benefit to having people think that like you having a cold means that I'll catch a cold, and that if I'm injected with a tiny bit of your cold, that I can get a defense against it, as in like what is sold as, as vaccinology as its tenants. That would be invaluable to that industry. And being that it would be invaluable to that industry, they spared exactly no expense in trying to prove what was obvious at the time to them, that contagion exists, i.e. somebody who's got like a runny nose when left in a prison cell with somebody who's thought at that time to be like entirely either free from their illness or not ill at all, that they, of course, they're going to get it because that's how it works. But it's been proven like literally over mainly prisoners, so people who had put themselves forward as test subjects in medical experimentation for the benefit of early release or full release, in their thousands, mainly around the time of the Spanish flu, so in the neighborhood of like 1918 to 1923 type neighborhood. That's the sort of period it was most done in, where they like would put like horse feed, things over the face that had extracted phlegm from ill people, snot, sputum, saliva, all the body fluids, basically bodily fluids, put into different types of soups and different types of potions to try blowing them into the nose, getting people to sit with on face to face, breathing into each other. So, you breathe in while I cough. And again, like do it or ordeal where you get like released from prison for your petty theft or whatever to take place.
But that could be because again, I'm what's between a straw man and a steel man? In terms of that expression, and that what I'm meaning here is to just continue the conversation in the most hypothetical sense. If it's then this psychosomatic element that again is sort of it's been aware of since like the 80s. I think this guy wrote the book in like the early 90s, mid 90s. It's on my other bookshelf in the other room. I think it's called The Stress of Life. And he basically comes up with this thing. So again, it's different immunities. So we know this in, say, cannabis consumption. It's still something that is a real bear bug of mine, that people go, oh, I'm smoking a sativa. Oh, I'm smoking an indica, so I'm going to bed now. It's like, no, it's such a gross over-exaggeration. Like you and I had to explain to somebody in the industry the other day that, I say explain, not like a child, but I just had to say, like, for me, I can smoke a good, say, like the honey cut of amnesia or the Amsterdam cut of amnesia haze. For some people, like, no, it blows my head off. For me, it's like a good cup of coffee, clean, efficient. I can breathe my body. There's no pain. There's no tension at all. I am just there. I am ready to go. Yeah, but for some people, it's like, nah, blows my head off. Off smoke lemon. Like if I get either a good orange or a good like more of the dank lemon than the light lemon, if people understand what I mean, like the weight, then yeah, that kind of element to it. Really anxiolytic, really calm for me. But there are some people who swear by like, if I smoke tangy or something, again, blows the head off. And we're both right. That's the thing people need to get to their fucking heads.
Your own experience from your perspective.
Exactly. And I think the same is true with as we said, with our immune system, which was another thing that was another reason I checked out of the narrative. I didn't pick a side. I stopped still and the Overton window shifted amongst me. Do you know what I mean? Because I went like, I know natural immunity. I understand that thing. We've taught that forever. And you all of a sudden saying no. Yeah. It's again, to link back to the fasting thing. The evidence there is suggesting around the 40 to 48 hour mark of nothing in the body, something switches in the body kind of goes to, we need to use what we've got. And your body generally only stores the best shit. Like when you've got even like people that are really sort of obese, it's usually good quality fat. There may be all the additives and other stuff like trapped inside, as science makes them harder to process. But generally, your body is filtering. It's going, oh, glucose, we'll stack that. Salt and stack that. We'll stack this. We'll stack that, and it puts it all around. So when assuming it's going, as we're like 10 minutes out of the woods, evolutionary speaking. We're only just out of the fucking cave. I know we like to talk now in the modern anthropological sense of, humans worked for 4 hours a day foraging. And on good days, some humans in some regions, in other fucking areas, it was a hard fucking life.
Yeah.
So you'd spend on the 2 days traveling or whatever. You wouldn't be stopping at McDonald's. You're going, right, there's a waterfall, three meals a day.
Totally.
Yeah. So you'd have that, as you said, that good food the night before. You'd take some of the freshest water you could find, and you would just do the fucking thing. And I'm the same. I love the endorphic feel of the way that the food hits me or the fresh water hits me after I've done the thing, and you're putting it off in your brain, going, no, but I'm doing the thing such efficient. And then when you get it and you sit with the thing, it's more rewarding, it's more meaningful.
Totally.
And I think that, again, the psychosomatic element of that, you take more from it than just the passive scrolling on your phone, throwing whatever crap in your face. Yeah. That's not the same thing. Like Japan, there's something I really appreciate about their tradition of eating and the way that they'll eat. And the way they go between meals and cleansing palates and
ginger.
I don't want to say like the pageantry to it, but the order to it.
Ceremony.
Exactly, the ceremony, the respect to it, similar like how the tea ceremony works, or even like sort of bathing, and you sit in sort of silence, you sit and you run water, and you sit in a steam. It's all of it is linked to good health practices that have been perfected over thousands of years. But it's also about grounding yourself. Yeah. To have that humility. Most people, and it scares me when I remind myself of this, because I am so in my own head. There's like me, it's like the Freudian thing of ego, superego, id. It's just three fucking voices going crazy all the time. I want to go away and do this, or we can't do this, we've got to do this. I'm hungry to do this. No, fuck you, we're doing this. Do you know, it's just an insanity. For some people, they don't even have an internal voice. They don't hear themselves talk. They just do. And that terrifies the shit out of me, because that means they never have that moment of self-critical thinking going, should I have done that?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And even if they do again, to quote The Simpsons, the Skinner meme of, am I wrong? No, it's the children. Even just that moment, what that does to your brain, there's the Japanese Buddhists in Zen Buddhism sort of describe it as satori. It's like brief enlightenment. It's where you step beyond the three states. So you're not your ego and id and impulse. You're not your superego being critical of the sense of self and having that sense of awareness, looking upon self, or being the ego just driving through life. You're nothing. And people go, oh, you're daydreaming. You know, in the West, we belittle these states, and it's like, that's the shit. People climb mountains and sit for 30 years. There's a guy in India who's had his arm in the air for 50 years trying to obtain similar sorts of states. If you could just have that shit, then you're blessed. Do you know what I mean?
I consider it to draw a parallel as well. That that's again why, and I think you're saying there that you enjoy as well the fasting state, because it allows you to be contemplative of what your next move is, particularly regarding like sustenance. You know, you think like
switches like wants and needs. You really start to understand when you are thirsty, when you are hungry. What is that impulse? Am I bored? Am I trying to eat a feeling? Am I trying to distract myself? Am I
Totally. Why I want this. Yeah. And making a good decision, because, you know, once you've gone like 15 hours, then what's 18 hours? What's 20 hours? You know, like I'll wait until like something really yummy is there that I'm like really happy to imbibe in. But I also feel the parallel that I was thinking when you were speaking was how mainstream narratives are similar to habit eating. So like we want to believe, if we go into the scenario wanting to accept a narrative or a thread of a narrative. So we think it's there's a loose virus all over the world and people are getting ill and dying from it. Okay. What else could it be? Oh, it's a lab leak. They were working on a biological weapon, and the Chinese were careless, and one of their people went to lunch in the wet market, and of course, the military is always trying to kill us with that. That's what they do. That's what they. Oh, and Fauci was working with them, and it was funded by Obama, and and then you start to realize, okay, this is a mainstream political narrative that's wanting to like divide the public's allegiance to the mainstream threads, and they again like
controlled opposition in a way. It's going, if there is a counter narrative, this is the counter narrative.
Yeah, because as you know, like right away, the escaped lab leak story becomes like a right-wing American political narrative right away, because again, it attacks Fauci, it attacks Obama. Fauci's a bit like cross what do you call them?
Like across the divide.
Yeah. He's non-political in that way. He's sort of, he's like upper to check. How do you say that? Upper to check. Apricek. Yeah, he's part of the mechanism of government. He's not within it, but the actual narrative is definitely like, by the right wing conservatives. That's basically what was taken as theirs. So suddenly you had, and I think I think that's when Trump went China virus with it.
China virus.
So now you've got the division, right? So now that's worked. So regardless, and again, you and I know, it doesn't matter what's true. You and I know that we'd sit in front of campfires, cross-legged, half naked with a loincloth on, doing as much drugs as we wanted to for the rest of our lives. You and I will never figure out what it is, whether it's like, an escaped actual, a real virus that's mutating, or a created virus that's been escaped, like that's just, and that's also, a good political position for people to take on board, that like, there's no hill to die on there. We'll never know. We don't know. So, once you sort of like take that approach to watching the news, should you ever wish to, and again, that's something I was starting to say earlier, that's what I'm suspect of now. If a narrative is run with as though it's fact, I'm suspicious of that voice. So, like, we have to be, we don't have to be solipsist. We don't have to act like we don't exist at all, or that, you're a figment of my imagination, or I'm projecting that Simpa is existing as someone who's speaking to me and that's my only world. I don't think we have to be like that extreme in terms of like philosophical, understanding. But I think that we can be much more understanding that we know sweet F all about what's going on, about like dark money government projects by deep state actors. Are we kidding? Are you like literally?
I think, yeah, the systems are so convoluted, and people have died and people have just fallen out of positions, and nobody knows. Yeah, there's no adults in the room. Do you watch It's Always Sunny?
No,
have you seen it? So It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It's probably one of the only modern sitcoms. Ironically, I think it actually is now the longest running live action sitcom. It kicked the shit out of all the old school stuff because it's managed to just keep its money. It's Rob McElhenney and Charlie Day, Glenn Morgan, I think. No, not Glenn Morgan. That's a fucking whiskey. Glenn Howard, I think, are the three main writers.
Yeah.
And it's an anti-hero comedy sitcom. And so it's like one of the five, five worst people. It's got Danny DeVito in it. He came in on the second series. Wow. Okay. And it's basically what if the five worst people owned a bar in Philadelphia. And so they tackle subjects like fucking Israel occupation, fucking racism, and all sorts of stuff. But they do it in a way of like their characters will be throwing away. And it's not just a neoliberal talking point. Do you know what I mean? It actually shows a counter thing, and it touches, and it allows for the spectrum of thought almost to exist. It's not just that binary. This is what we're saying is the good today, and that's the bad, and then tomorrow we'll figure it out, sort of thing. It's actually like it's anyway. There's an episode in that basically Mac, who's one of the characters, and fucking Dennis gets annoyed because Mac's getting fat. And he lives with him. And Dennis is a narcissist. It's portrayed as if he might be a serial killer and rapist throughout the whole thing. He's really fucking talented. And Mac has body morphic issues, and he might be gay, and he's not gay, but it's a whole thing. And like he gets fat, and so he invents this cult. And there's this guy, the Master, and so he's been initiated into this cult. And what happens is when they all find out that there is no Master and one of them made it up, somebody will make rules and say, I just got a special letter from the Master. Now we have to do this. And somebody goes, oh, yeah, well, I spoke to the Supreme Master, who is the Master's Master, and he said we don't have to do that anymore. And so they're all just bullshitting and lying. I feel that's what's been happening since the Second World War, and no one has a fucking clue what is going on. And like you say, we can never really get it, because as you get with the esoteric thing of philosophically there, it's where are you to me? You're not there. You're here. You're here. I can only perceive you through me in that sense. So as you say, it's like if you don't have this awareness of there's your reality, there's then your individual reality, and I think it's called sombra, like the sudden realization that others are equally as conscious and as complex as you. Unless you have that feeling constantly, which I do because of my anxiety, frankly, you forget that other people are not you. So you just go, well, I'm good. So this is the good thought. You must
Yeah.
think the good thought. You didn't think the good thought,
Yeah.
therefore you're bad. And through that narrative, the mainstream media, like you say, it's only good or bad. So when you
Love
hear
it.
anybody speaking with certainty, be fucking suspicious. I say that to my audience, even me, especially me. Hold me to account. Jesus Christ, like none of us know fucking anything.
Yeah.
We can correlate and go, I believe this. Here's my opinions and my data and my stuff. And as I did to you before, go, well, I don't agree with you, but I'm not going to belittle you and say, well, I'm right, you're wrong. I'm curious. Let's talk
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
this. Let's have a
Yeah.
conversation. If we can get back to that intrigue, because
Mhm.
again, to go to the vaccine thing, like I believe that the polio vaccine was a thing because of the fact the fucker gave it away. He registered for like $1, made it universal, and from the state of polio of what is documented and the fact that it basically doesn't exist, that's a win. But then, like you say, with this whole thing with what's happened in the recent 20, 30 years,
Mhm.
I mean, look what's happened, Jesus Christ, in the past year, folks. I frequent a Sainsbury's down the road. You know, I'm going to get a bit of bread or whatever else when I can't be asked going to the larger supermarket and getting overwhelmed. And they have their newspapers at the front.
Yeah.
And since probably last September, I have seen a headline: new Alzheimer's vaccine, new cancer vaccine, new Parkinson's vaccine. It's like, I can't, I don't need to be anti-vax or pro-vax, or I don't need to have an opinion on that at any point in time to just be like, why now? How this fast? What the fuck?
Yeah.
I don't, I don't get it. But then when you extrapolate back again to Steel Mark, the other one is there are some people on like their sixth or seventh booster. And again, I can't get that. I mean, I remember there was clips going around on the internet not that long ago. People were sharing from like 1978 or something, and it was in one of the states in America, and it was about drink driving laws coming into force. And it's like people go, "What do you mean? I can't drink beer on the way home from a 12-hour shift? This is communist." And and so it's like, and they couldn't get the head around it. And the guy even like, and there were arguments made like, well, I can't buy a 4-pack, open one beer. And it's like, no, because then, as arguable, that one beer you have there isn't indicative of the 20 you could have had before. Or so they drew a line, and over time, we've all come to accept that. Granted, there's still, and it is a classist thing because the more posh people that I know, they will go to dinner and have 4, maybe 5, a cheeky one, and to drive fucking home. And yet they'll go these stoners on the road, these druggies. It's the hypocrisies of all these. Like I said, I just wish that if this was the thing that they said it was, for me, the world should have gone, "Ugh, what the fuck?" Yeah, they went, oh, go outside and exercise. I'm like, why aren't you sending us vitamins door to door? Why when I go to the supermarkets, was nobody buying supplements? Was nobody looking at that? Was nobody considering their diet?
Yeah.
It,
Yeah. Yeah.
people just wanted to stock. Oh, let's get more pasta because that stays long. Let's get more of this. Let's get more of this. Let's freeze all of these premium. Let's feed. And the
Terrible.
diet got worse. Plus, then the fear of everything else. That regardless of our theories of whether it is a contagious
Yeah.
virus
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whether it wasn't,
Yeah.
the consequence was still the same. And I think that because of that, a lot of those people that we spoke of, again, I hate to use the phrase, but in the middle of that
Yeah.
woke,
Yeah.
awake
No,
paradigm, again, this language needs updating, Jesus.
hard to say.
But those kind of people that are
Normal
just,
people.
yeah, they're typically like your bourgeoisie. You know, they've got a little bit of money, they've got enough that they're comfortable enough that they don't need to question anything. Why
Yeah.
would you? If you
Yeah.
see terror outside of your windows, why would you leave your house? It's
Yeah.
nice in there. You got Netflix. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You can chill.
Yeah.
It's and so I don't blame those people necessarily for their ignorance, but in those moments, they didn't choose to act out of their best intellectual interest. I felt there was some that did, but I think what happened is, as we described before, the culling on social media was so fast. Like presenters were losing shows. Do you know what I mean? Big mainstream voices would have gone overnight, and it was like, and so I did the same. Like I just turned off social media. I turned off as much from the world as possible because, like I said, it felt like everything was being over policed, even though it always has been and always will be online. But it just felt this extra sudden pressure that what if I say the C word?
Yeah.
You know, I say cunt all day long, but if I said that COVID, I mean, even now, this is going to get flagged up by YouTube. There'll probably be a thing below saying about misinformation or whatever else. But neither of us have put forward
Yep.
an argument. We've just expressed beliefs, opinions, and then given sort of our own evidence, whether it's anecdotal or direct toward it. And that is what we need discourse, conversation, regardless of stance. Actually, the more distance, the more we need that conversation. But I think people have become so placated by delete, block, God, you don't belong in my circle. You don't belong in my groups. Actually, we're going to start another group chat with everybody but you and talk about you. Do you know this? It's teen. It's like the Arrested Development, to borrow that '80s phrase, and it goes back to, like I said, the lack of adults. I don't know there never ever was. Maybe
Yeah.
they were just more violent and more vicious back in the day when it was actual, like, millions of people died, hundreds of thousands in a day, like in the Somme and shit, when it was real fucking shit.
Yeah.
And whether we just kind of got so placated with ourselves, and it's all just we're stuck in the mire of the fugazi, the fakeness, the falsity of reality, and people are starving.
Yeah.
The economies are crashing. They go, oh, the economy's going well. It's like, yeah, because you've got another Ferrari. Louis Vuitton, what I can't remember the name of the company, but like the Louis Vuitton group are like one of the most profitable enterprises on the planet. Their wealth went through the fucking roof in COVID because the rich suddenly couldn't go to restaurants. The rich suddenly couldn't go out to the fucking country club and, pay the valets and all their money that they would just ink out into the world, and all their cocaine dealers and everything else that just suddenly they had. So they bought more assets.
Yeah. 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 Buy buy big when it's hurting most. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, that's it. I was where I've seen you a few times down at the gala in Durham. Every year I go see what the hell's his name? I can't remember the name of the director, but It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I always think of the hell's his name? I'm terrible with names today.
Hmm.
Bailey's are the good guys, and the other banker is called. Yep, that's not my brain. Anyway, but that guy, there's a point where, yeah, like his attitude towards it, and he causes the crash in the run on the banks, and then he says, "I'll give you 20. I think it's 25 cents to a dollar. No, 50 cents to a dollar on the mark,"
Yeah.
because again, he knows he can withstand that. So I think if you then extrapolate that out to every part of industry, that's all they're doing. It's disaster capitalism. When people, like we said, are most fearful, when it looks like the world is literally about to end, that's when you can get the most money. Look at what the most profitable industry throughout human endeavors is:
Yeah.
war.
Yeah. And it makes people nihilistic as well in their purchasing, running up credit cards because you're never going to have to.
Yeah, sun's going to blow up. We're all going to die. Water's going to rise. This is going to happen.
Yeah, totally.
And things will happen, but we'll adapt. Read Darwin, people. I know it's dense, but Jesus Christ, man, don't look at the fucking Huxley's grandfather's interpretation of social Darwinism, because that's just eugenics. That's fucking bullshit. But if you actually look at like classic Darwinian theory, it's adaptability.
Yeah.
The one thing he says is adaptability, whether it be a bacteria, whether it be a single-celled organism, to a fucking whale, whatever. It's the pinnacle of that design in that environment and the ability to adapt to it constantly. That is what humans are. That's why we have all the shit that we have. But it feels like I keep describing it to my mate who I took the year of acid with, because we obviously philosophize and have ethical conversations like two or three times a week.
Yeah.
And so I was talking about this thing of, like, I call it formulation theory.
Yeah.
Like everything people have identified, as you spoke about before, the formula. So we know what's a good sitcom. Oh, well, the data and analytics say it needs to have this person. We need to release it at this time. We need this budget. If we use these colors on the font, and it's so that 99% of it is the formula. 1% is the authenticity.
Yep.
Where it used to be like, the more authentic you were, then the system was there to let you. All you were the thing that was stopping you from rising in any sort of collective public art form, whether it be sort of stand-up, being an actor, being a poet, writer, performer, whatever, in any sort of sense. Is you used to be the impediment. And granted, there were class issues and backgrounds of various other sort of obstructions that were built into the neoliberal capitalist system, but you could still seek to rise to that. And if now this is, you've got more of a chance than ever, or you can go viral. No, they've closed all of the gates to everything. Yeah. If you speak the wrong words, the algorithm shuts you off. Somebody doesn't need to look at your content to go bad. The machine does it while you're uploading it. It decides what it's going to do with your content. Do you know what I mean? This is so people then go, I'll just do more of the formula. So I'll go viral because I'm doing the formula. Look at the books again. I'll write this book. How I wrote it like this. That's just the formula of the book. Where's the book? Do you know what I mean? And I feel the more I look for sustenance and substance in everything, the less I see. It's just copy print formula. And this segues in quite nice. So I wanted to ask you about like AI. And like what's happening with comedy writing, because obviously we had the SAG-AFTRA strikes and everything in America, and a big part of that was about comedy writers and performers being able to produce and own their own intellectual property and actually write these things. Because if you look at
their own persona.
Yeah, well, have their own voice, be their own voice, because obviously there are some people. I read the other day. What's his name?
Likeness.
The guy from Marvel, who the old guy died, wrote the books. Stan Lee. Stan Lee's estate have sold his likeness to Marvel for all future movies, so he can have a cameo in all future movies.
Yeah.
And it gets then a bit dystopian because then like, well, what happens 50 years from now, 100 years from now? If that's an intellectual property, if that's a thing, a digital, if they're making assets, I mean, Jesus, there's thousands of hours of me on the internet now. Does that mean they could just create an AI of Simba somewhere? But it would. My point is that, well, I think to put my theory on it in and ask the question at the same time. This is terrible journalism or podcasting here. But my theory is the AI can't replicate it because all it can do is do the formula. No matter how small the percentage of authenticity, it will never replicate the authenticity.
Yeah, totally. I get that. Well, in terms of the doom and gloom that you mentioned earlier, my favorite waiter in one of my favorite restaurants in Toronto, Gujarati Indian restaurant, all veggie, 100 dishes, but all like diverse and wonderful. His name was Bill, and we used to exchange acid together, which is a nice relationship to have with your favorite waiter. And I once sat down at the table, and he came over and just like, without beginning conversation, just said, when I was a younger man, I thought the world was going to end. And then I realized it was only my world. Papa Dom's? I just like, I'll always take that from Bill. I haven't seen him for a number of years, but like, that's how we can get when we were talking earlier about, your perspective doesn't have to be detrimented by the doom and gloom, and as we were speaking earlier, the trauma, mind control that's inflicted upon us. We don't have to, and again, to take your quote of, we don't have to accept that which is presented to us as reality, that that there's no future, or that our future is bleak, or that we're in this pressure cooker of no options. And we can appreciate that everything that we know and can experience in our real life is attainable right now, is here. We can, and to enjoy those moments. If I same when I'm in front of audiences, I'll speak with them about that. We just enjoy here. Our car might be stolen, our tires might be slashed, our houses might be burned down by the time we get there, but there's no other reality than the one we're sharing. So let's enjoy that.
It's that. You've ever heard of Eckhart Tolle?
Yes, yeah.
Power of now sort of thing. Yeah, again, and I think that's where, again, because you were maybe the third person. I was very agoraphobic for a while, as just a result of a lot of trauma. And it was in 2011, 2010, something like that. I started going to comedy gigs at the Gala, and just pushed myself, go by myself, and just sneak out back, have a joint, go in, sort of see some comedians and stuff. And what I started to realize was, I lose an hour, but I gain the world. I don't say loses in a loss. I mean, like it almost, a good comedian is the show goes, it's gone. You can't remember it as an audience member, because you're just riding these endorphins and this your body's tingling. You laugh and you hurt and you joy, your thing. You laugh and then you construct all of the things. Like I remember seeing Phil Jupitus.
Oh yeah, wonderful.
Fucking killed it. He came up with a thing in the second act of his thing about Geordie Hitler. I don't know how he got onto it, but it was like the Mackhams versus Geordies, as everyone sort of comments on in Durham, because we're between, as it were. And he got on this thing, and he was literally on the floor crying. He couldn't. Every time he tried to get himself back up, he was laughing. And he had his own joke. And because of the feedback from the audience, because we were that, and then people were shouting like good. Like very well timed, not heckling, but just participation, and the way it reverberated, and to watch people go out of there again. He took, you people outside of this room are against each other because of this stupid thing. I'm going to take this to the absurdity, and so comedy is healing. Comedy is bringing together, especially in you obviously opened for, I think, Frankie's first two, or maybe two of his early DVDs, and Frankie Boyle was, people were like, oh Jesus Christ. Frankie, his deliverance was to make you go, ooh, and you laugh and then you at yourself to think, well, what? And you think of that and you have that abstraction that, wait a
Yeah.
minute, comedy doesn't have to have the same sort of meaning behind. Do you know what I mean? And I think that we've since lost that kind of element within comedy of it. It has to be tribal.
Yeah.
So this you see it, especially or it's parroted in American campuses that you've got to be sort of left wing comedian to go on stage. You can't be sort of right wing. And then comedians are like, well, I'm not right or left wing. I'm just a comedian. And people are like, no,
Thank
your
you.
joke is this or that. And it's people's perception. It defines yeah.
You're still not welcome because you're not us.
Yeah, but true comment. Your political opinion shouldn't. If you're not proselytizing, as we were describing sort of with Bill Hicks earlier, who've then stood at the pulpit and evangelicalizing about that thing, but even if you are, he did it in such a way that was kind of like he's unashamedly himself, but he was never attacking the other in the way that he did it. He used the otherization, which we were supposed to not these days, but that's how comedy works. It's how life works. The fact that you're Craig Campbell and not me means we can have a fucking conversation. And I feel we're losing this mechanism. So like, what's your experience obviously on the road? You say that you're finding it difficult. Is there a cure to that kind of apathy that goes like, because it's the audience that are doing it. It's that one member that hears and goes, I'm left of this conversation. He said, right, so you're bad. But I found that funny. So it's their discomfort that then is harming the art of the comedy. As you said, the comedian, it's you ebb and flow. You feel it with the wave. And like say, you'll say something and go, I'm in an area where I didn't know I'm not supposed to say that. What did I fucking say? And then it breaks down that relationship and that dialogue. And then it becomes like a hostage situation.
Yeah, it's funny when you mentioned it earlier. I was thinking of that as well. That these are like the paradigm that you're describing takes place in ensemble shows. So you're essentially dealing with either the house's audience or an amalgam of the audiences of the performers who are on the bill, and most of them would be like better at self-promotion than I would be. So I'd probably be in an imbalance as far as like partisanship of the audience, and again, I was thinking earlier when you mentioned that before, these reactions that you're describing, these are like the left-right paradigm reactions. These are bubbles, right? These are like social media bubbles, and you and I can like look on, essentially like threads against Instagram, against Twitter, against all these different political spectrums, and that gets into like the division of the society through what's called the system of moods. So there's a hero will be provided for everybody, whatever your little cult is, whatever your compartmentalized bubble is, and wherever it exists, either in a real world or in a spectrum of social media or a computer generated one. Your hero will be provided. Your leader will disseminate to you that which is necessary to keep you in the wider umbrella of conflict within the Overton window. And so interestingly, when you were saying that, I was thinking, I don't run into that conflict because I'm in my own bubble. Because like those shows I was describing to you in Scotland, they're, to whatever degree I have an audience, they're my audience. They're people who come to see Craig Campbell the same way you might have in Durham, in 2011. That's exactly the same thing that I'm experiencing now. So I don't have conflict with my audience. I have like an amazing time interfacing with my audience, and we very rarely, we do have like, and in fact, I find this more amplified, Simpa, when we do have conflict, it's even more extraordinary because we were all getting along so well. And then I have to like figure out, what did I say? Where did I imbalance this like delicate construct that of our relationship? And when it happens, I quite enjoy it, because then that's actually the meat and potatoes of what I most enjoy, is when I can dive into that world and like really get into, what did you guys think I thought about this bit? Because like this is exactly how I feel, and I'm unabashed in my feelings towards it, and I'm articulating it. But some of you are uneasy about it. Let's get into this. Let's find out exactly what that is. So that's the offshoot of it that I most enjoy. But the simple fact is, and the saddest fact of it is that there's really no conflict in audience scenarios anymore, because most people are doing their shows, if they're doing a touring show, on the back of their own self-promotion, on their own media. They've already been distilled down by the people as you're describing. Oh, I don't like that guy. Oh, I don't have any time for that kind of joke. Oh, I don't want that in my life. So they're already in this distillation process that's created this product and it's like, network, and then it's moved into a live venue setting. And so there's no conflict within that bubble, but there's also no interaction with the surrounding bubbles that are moving through society with their windows rolled up, ignoring each other and not really knowing each other, rather than other than when they're being lampooned as a target of somebody else's ire or somebody else's comedy.
It's odd that it almost feels like, because I'm thinking of like your Lenny Bruce. He went to prison for fucking saying fuck. I say fuck every other sentence. I can't, as you may see on YouTube, guys, my shorts have probably got 3 fucks in because it's just the way I speak. Do you know what I mean? It's not even...
People shut it down because of that.
Or like George Carlin, the 7 words that you can't say. I don't know if I can remember them all. It's like, what is it? Fuck, shit, whatever they are, the 7 words. Anyway, great set. Check it out. But... So they used comedy as a means to push societal norms, and comedians they weren't activists per se, but if they believed in something, they fucking said something, and then they could defend it on stage. Whereas now, so it went from being like America and post Jim Crow, or that sort of era still of segregation, and white and black crowds starting to integrate, and it started to break down those barriers. Once you could laugh with the people, and there would be a black guy make a joke about the white guy in the audience, and the white and black people laugh together because once that's what it felt like. So it went to this mix, and it was a secondary language. It was poetry for a long time. Again, we spoke very highly of Hicks. There are many people of sort of that generation and ilk that did very similar, but because they were maybe more abstract or conspiratorial or questioning of certain systems, like they weren't allowed to maybe obtain the same sort of notoriety. But I feel that now comedy's gone the other way. Like you say, that I deliberately, like I said, I started just going to what comedian's down. Go down still to the, what are they called, the comedy store. They do it every quarter in Durham, and it travels around. And I don't give a shit what I see. Do you know what I mean? I don't necessarily. I want to go see comedy. I want to hear different people's opinions. The same when I'm at like events, as you say. I'm quite lucky in the cannabis space that there's a lot of controversy and a lot of disagreements and a lot of stops along that bell curve, as it were. There's a lot of differing opinions. Yeah. And I love that. I revel in that. When I'm on stage and somebody challenges me, that's easier than me having to just try and convince people of whatever it is I'm speaking on, And so, is there a way to then diversify those audiences, or to because the Fringe as well, like we spoke of last time, Joanne, about kind of the capture of some of these sort of shows that you have to fit within that certain window. And there are some people who will have one opinion on one subject, and they go, no, we're going to discount the rest of your career in comedy. I'm thinking of Graham Linehan, I think his name is, the Father Ted writer. There are some people who just... And you don't need to either agree or necessarily disagree with their opinions. This is what I don't seem to understand, is why, no one is fallible. We're a pseudo-Christian country, yet people forget what fucking Jeebus said. Jeebus. Jesus. Well, Jeebus. Do you know what I mean? And it was like, what is it? He without sin cast the first stone. None of y'all motherfuckers should be throwing stones.
For sure. Yeah.
I don't get where we're at in this reality that I go, no, my sins are accepted or they're hidden, but your sins... Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's so hypocritical. And again, the comedy should be that leveler. I'm a vegan, for fuck's sake. I watch a lot of comedy. I laugh at the vegan jokes. I know those vegans. You know what I mean? It's better for them. It should, but there's a lot of people that would be in that position who always say, do you know what I mean? And I think like Ramesh Ranganathan, quite like a lot of his material, but he gets booked constantly for like the vegan festival. And I guarantee you he's in there doing like anti-carnivore jokes and killing it. Do you know what I mean? And and I've got no problem with that, but I just wish the audiences were connected. So instead of there being this polarization, frankly pushed more by industry than difference, because I'll sit next to someone eating a fucking steak. I'm choosing not to eat the cow, not you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Sorry, I've just gone on a rant there.
Democratization of personal choice, of course. That's exactly what's happened, and it's destroyed comedy, as you're describing. Absolutely that, because it's taken away the ability to be neutral for a moment, like you described earlier, to posit a thought. This is like something I'm not married to. This is an idea, let's air it out in a public space and see what the reaction to it is. And no, you're not allowed to now because it's not like adopted one or,
I think
provided narratives.
There's a mechanism there that I'll admit I felt the pressure for, and I've just thought of there, and I went, oh, why did I feel that way? When you mentioned about nukes in NASA, like we could have gone down that. That's another half an hour or another whatever. But something sort of pinged me, and obviously I made a note I need to go back to that because we've mentioned it, and the reason that I felt the pressure to go back to it was almost this implied other. I actually have an audience, so this is different than if we were just sat talking. But do you know what I mean? It's this kind of a pressure of the other's perception of going, well, because you didn't disagree with him on nukes, you're saying that Hiroshima didn't happen, that Nagasaki didn't happen, that I'm agreeing with that. And I've never said or implied or done anything toward that. You mentioned an opinion. We didn't go into it, so therefore I'm complicit in it. This is something they do to Rogan all the fucking time. And it's like, think about how much shit people talk on a podcast. Yeah. Like, I've got ADHD, for fuck's sake. I come up with all the craziest of shit. We talk for fucking hours. But I think that's what's happening as well. That coupled with this thing, so people go, well, here's my list of words or my script. And they sit with their phone for like 8 hours on like TikTok and things, just learning the new script for the day. We don't say these words anymore. Okay, right, this way. I behave like this. And it makes me feel like soccer moms in the 90s when they were portrayed as trying to be cool and hip. I'm down with the kids. Or it's the Steve Buscemi and the skateboard meme. I'm speaking in a lot of memes. I have a young audience. It helps. But it's
Buscemi?
yeah. You know the meme I mean, where he's got like a backwards cap and he's holding a skateboard and he's wearing a hoodie, and the meme is like, "I'm down with the cool kids," or I can't remember what the original meme
right. Yeah.
But it's basically people use that to then describe when an older person or somebody aged out of a space gets in it. It's usually the youth do it derogatory to elder members. Say, like, if you see someone at a festival in their 40s, like the 18-year-olds will share it being like, oh, fucking Steve Buscemi on a skateboard. You know what I mean?
I've only seen, I've only seen or experienced that recently, particularly in fasting forums, and I was blown away by it, Simpa. Even like in the last couple of days, a 19-year-old guy talking to like I think a guy said he was 47, and he's like called him elderly. And I was just like, holy, like I didn't realize that there was that paradigm perception going on.
It's accelerated massively with the boomers.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, so it was boomers, millennials, but now that the Gen Z, or as some of them term them, Zoomers, which I think is quite a better turn of phrase, because obviously some people say Gen Z, and the Z hits my ears really funny. But yeah, so anyway, that sort of cohort, they're now moving into where we were. I said we as older mid-millennial, sort of 15 years ago, of coming into the marketplace and trying to participate, and they're fucked. We were fucked, but they are fucked. And so they then ask us, well, how are you fucked? And we go to the Gen X guys and go, well, what the fuck happened to you guys? And they went, this dickhead. And you can see it. Look at the geriocracy that's running the world. You've got fucking 2 80-year-olds or thereabouts running for president in America. Starmer's going to be 71, I think, by the time he would finish his term if he would have become prime minister this year. You've got people like Rupert Murdoch has just stepped back down from official duties, and I believe 92 years old, I think that's 92. I think he's 92 years old. 92. Then you got someone like fucking Kissinger, lives to be like 100. Like, these people still have their fingers in their pies, and I feel there's this bottleneck of stuff. And so that each generation, Gen Alpha as they call them, that are like, I think 14 and younger now, they are going to be the most revolutionary, violent, and I don't mean in the sense of like, but they already are kind of stabbing each other up, but I don't mean to sound like an old man. What I mean is that they have even less hope. If you're distilling and creating the hope. I grew up in the legacy of Thatcherism. So we had no apprenticeships in the North. We had the death of industry. We were still reeling from Orgreave and shit like that, and the attacks on the miners and the decimation of our communities.
And the disillusion of the authority figures, the police attacking.
Literally badges off. They got them from all over the country. I mean, there was a lot of scabs in Durham. If you look at you read sort of the things, but quite a lot of people from the Durham force didn't sort of stand. Like, people were like, I'm not going to beat my fucking neighbor. But it's that they don't need that physical violence or that mob anymore, because the mob is existential. It's online. Do you know what I mean? It's on Facebook or whatever. So we don't have to have the Stasi or anything like that, or the big brother, as it were, in the Orwellian sense, because we do it. When you go, what's on your mind? And you start typing, most people, I'll say, or maybe I don't know. Most people I speak to will have a mechanism in the head of going, how's this going to be read in 10 years? How is this going to be interpreted? You know, I've put some innocuous statuses on Facebook over the year, like literally like a few words that just means nothing. And because it's ambiguous, or people can make they start a thread of like hundreds of comments attacking it. It's just like, what the fuck? I just said I liked quiche or something stupid. Do you know what I mean? And people are like, oh, you don't like this. And the lack of context. This is again why I praise to people. I love talking, but I adore talking, even with my enemies, one-on-one. Because there's something to it. I can see you, I can read you, I can feel you, I know what you are in front of me, I can see your twitches, your movements, do you know what I mean? Whereas if it's just a few little words, it's like you might be using different grammar to me. You might be using colloquial language and I'm using dictionary form. You know, you might be speaking and like changing, misspelling your words, which I misread. Do you know, there's so much context that's lost in this nuance.
Yeah, I get it. I was thinking we were overly focused sometimes on the conflict as well, particularly in live performance. And I've had like moments where I was describing earlier, when there's a disconnect with an audience that I'm having a good time with, and I'll sometimes, I'll get into that and over focus on, that sort of like, wow, we don't concur at all on that level. But I was thinking of how when it happens similarly, the setup is the same, but you realize that the disconnect was that they were misunderstanding your position, and then when the resolve is found, when the exposition is like when my side is explained, then they spontaneously applaud. And the one that I'm thinking of was it was like a show in Cornwall about 15 years ago, and I'd come back from, I think I'd been snowboarding in France for a couple of weeks or whatever, and I hadn't been following, not that I'm like a dog on a bone with it anyway, but like UK based news, and there had been some huge product recall in like Tesco and Sainsbury's and all the main giants.
Was it the horse meat?
No, it was, you may remember it actually. It was a type of yellow dye that was like carcinogenic. And of course, it like, when they listed all the products involved in the recall, and it was just like 1,000 things that anybody other than like a complete sadist wouldn't even dream of putting near their face, let alone in their body. But it's just all, it's just start to read products. It's like, fucking like ostrich fingers, just just utter garbage, like fabricate, fabricated food, but just with coloring in it that's just literally paint thinner as a color. And so I was incredulous. The audience had made some heckle that had referenced this, like, this phenomenon that was taking place in real time at the moment. And I was just like, well, what are you on about, basically? And they were like, well, clearly, what we're on about. It's like, at this point, they're talking about something that's like mainstream news, headline news. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And they said, oh, well, there's like the product recall with the yellow dye and the foods. And, this always happens where they break into discussion groups and somebody elects themselves the spokesperson. Like, what you don't know what you're talking about? The new thing. And I was just like, no, I've been like, sorry, I just got here from like, I flew into Exeter Airport like a minute ago, and I've got here 4 hours after that. I don't know at all what's going on. And anyway, like I haven't had a TV in my house since like 1997, and it wasn't mine. It was just part of a roommate group then. And I was just like, got about that far, Simpa, and then they just started like, what? And I said, yeah, I haven't had like a TV for like 20 years before this show. And they're just like, well, like this whole group of like pretty cloistered, Cornish people were just like literally, living on the top of the moor, just coming out of the fog to come and see a show in town kind of thing. Just started clapping. I was like, are you clapping because I don't have a TV? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, yeah. Can I move here? Is there anywhere like they don't have a room I can stay in? And that's like a warm, I can't even think of an analogy for that experience, but that's when it's wicked, when it's just like, yeah, we are on the same page. We were just a bit confused there for a second because of my situation, but like, you're my people again. It's just wonderful when that happens.
I think, you touch on something that I've seen quite a lot of comedians. Like the gala doesn't do what it used to do since fucking the lockdowns. It just hasn't. I don't know whether it's funding or what. There's just nowhere near the number of people go through it, comedians
Oh,
at all.
yeah.
But yeah, I've obviously seen a lot, and I think the ones that I consider to be good or to be competent in their craft live, because I think there is difference between performing to be recorded and being live and in the moment. And I think the people that can free form and actually, like you said, with humility, in that there's a lot of comedians who would almost put their back would get up, I can't show weakness sort of thing at you. Or as we were speaking of before, that political polarization, that if the comedian, like you spoke before about exposition, like Ricky Gervais, I think 2 specials ago, opened his special by explaining comedy. He literally comes and he's like, comedy is, and he explains how the exposition that works and the juxtapositions and you know, and he literally explains it, then does this fucking set and then gets fucking slated in the media. And he's literally like, how do you not, do you know what I mean? It's there is this thing of participation. And I think that's why people want to go. They'll watch the lives and see them on. Well, you don't have Mock the Week anymore. God bless, we miss Mock the Week. For all it became a bit shite toward the end, it was still a good proving ground for a lot of people in this country.
Right, you said goodbye. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And so yeah, there's that kind of circuit of kind of performers, and that they go into a room and they'll do the I've learned the 4 things about your local place formula. Do you know what I mean? Then they'll move straight into the same shit you'll see the next night, the next night, the next night, and the next night. And obviously there has to be a certain consistency and continuity. But some of the best performers I see, they'll go for an hour and 30, 40 minutes of that is construct. And the rest they're just like, let's go, let's go. And it's
yeah.
the point to what I was sort of touching on before, that's sort of secondary but separate, is the point of comedy. Like we were saying about Frankie before, he takes you down a thought one way and you go, oh my God, he's going to kill that baby. And he says something and you go, no, I'm the one that thought the baby. Do you know what I mean? It's the craft of it. It's the juxtaposition. I think it was maybe again after Aristotle, actually, or one of the Greek sort of those 3 generations of philosophers, was literally like humor is found in juxtaposition. So yeah, I think that having to then explain that to a modern comedy audience, I think, is very telling. But I think the way to cure that or to combat that in the small ways is exactly what you're doing, is humanizing them, doing the legwork, frankly, that people don't see. People forget, like a comedian, they think, oh, you turn up for an hour and you've got your travel all the way fucking there. You've got to work on your fucking material. You've got to know the places you've got to go. You've got to keep up to current events and shit. Wow. You've then obviously now got to keep this hold of the sphere of what I'm allowed to say. I mean, good comedians still they'll say it, but they'll comment on it in, like, I don't know, like the way Dave Chappelle has kind of gone about things. I think he's done quite a meta-analysis of the way that he's presented his comedy. Same with Ricky Gervais, in that they're taking criticism of what they're doing, but they're saying, I don't believe the thing I'm saying. I'm making the fucking joke. And the point of comedy is to be inclusive, not exclusive. So if I ignore you as a group, that's the bigotry, not making fun of you and then moving on to the next one, Like we were saying in the preamble, I think Jerry Seinfeld was on a podcast or a radio show going like, oh, leftism and PC culture's ruined comedy. And the next night, there was the roast of Tom Brady. And Jesus Christ, Tony Hinchcliffe goes off. It's like somebody gave him a list of things not to say, and he just went fuck and just went through it. Same with like the stand-up that he has created, like the show and the format that he has, and he brings people on, they have the panel.
Okay.
Like that. There is a renaissance in that kind of style of comedy. If people want that, and people understand that you don't have to, well, that's left comedy, that's right comedy, or that, you just, no, they're fucking funny. I can laugh at that thing and go, ooh, and still have sympathy for the group that they're speaking of. Just because you laugh at a joke that somebody constructed doesn't mean you provide a bigotry or a hatred to them. Do you know what I mean? The video in my head there is this, I saw yesterday, was a lass in a wheelchair. It was a small, like a reel. It would have been a Vine back in the day. In fact, maybe it was a Vine because it was old quality.
Right.
And it's a lass at a wishing fountain. And it looks like she just bent down, flicking a coin in. She flicks it in and the camera pulls out and the woman goes, what'd you ask for? And the woman went, legs. And she's in a wheelchair and she's got no fucking legs. And it's like, that's what we want. That's the thing of it. Comedy is this healing, is this universal thing that I can still have sympathy. I can still have sympathy for your disability, but now you're far more human to me. You're not this alien thing, this China doll that I'm like, you're fucking human. You're like Dave from the pub. I can crack wise to you. You get it. Do you know, it's like we said, comedy is like, it's another language. We're all comedians. That's why everyone says to a stand-up comedian, I could be a comedian. So they fucking do it, but in the pub, do you know what I mean? Or around a barbecue, wherever there's more than a few mates,
Good luck.
everybody does that little bit. Do you know what I mean? Everyone will bring out their little bits, and everyone with their dad jokes, and it's almost like a love language. I know that's been sort of debunked and whatever, but to borrow that kind of sociological structure,
Right.
the different comedians speak in different ways, but they're all trying to, I feel, communicate their reality to others. And go, it's basically what was his name, Jay Leno. You seen this? You heard about this? That's what I feel all stand-up is people just almost like autists running around going, oh, did you see the birds? Did you see the thing? Did you see the thing? They just want to draw attention to things that they see and the juxtapositions and the crossover in the Venn diagram that, like we said, a lot of people, I think, don't otherwise experience. That's why we seek comedy, or we used to seek comedy.
And the process of the filtration before that is also what you're describing that people don't see, that they have to like yourself, I'm sure in your sort of autistic state, similar to myself, you have like 1,000 thoughts before you distill it down to the one that you can like interface with others to even hope to expose, to give exposition toward, so that's probably the process many people don't see in the comedian. You got the scatter brain, but you've got to like at some point find something that other people relate to enough to be like, you see, this thing here, it's been eating away at me all afternoon, and that's the like madness of it, right? Because imagine like throughout the day and the myriad of things that you can focus on and what you can like, on your way to a show, you're thinking, what am I going to say to them out of the gate? What's my first line? What am I going to, that's the bigger bit of the process than actually doing it when you get there. You might want to like figure out whether your lips move or work when you get there, but it's the same, sort of, that's the struggle of the process is getting to the bit that you can even hope to be on terms with somebody to represent towards them. That's what I love about it anyway, because, I have a billion thoughts in the day and it's like, what the hell one would anyone else want to hear about once I get to it, and then you start to think of the one like yourself and I, what one we have back catalog on, what subject do we want to introduce that if it actually goes pear-shaped or if it goes in every direction, what do we have that we want to speak about that can like reestablish or, you give them the head of the pyramid, but that you've got like the base there if it need be. And that's sort of, sort of what I most enjoy about it anyway. That's the most fun. And like you were talking earlier about like the things that you look up, many people don't do that after a conversation. I'm presuming you're a lot like me, that you'll like go in and sort of investigate the things that you already know about and then investigate things that you've just heard of or that have dovetailed into something else that you're talking about. And that's sort of, I think, the difference between sort of yourself as a podcaster and a voice for a paradigm, and myself as a comedian, that's our job, our homework. People forget about our homework. We're not just like getting lucky because we're in pub chats all the time. We're like bringing to the conversation that which we've like had to spend long hours, pretty boring hours on our own, autistic hours of just devouring information that, mining thousands of words to try and find the paragraph, the sentence, the one word that you don't know that you have to look up to make everything else make sense. And then you're like, oh, I'm really glad I got no sleep last night, because that's like something I really wanted to know for a long time, that information. And that's, while at the same time, you're having to filter through everything that we've talked about, whether it's being injected, whether it's being enforced upon us. Why am I even thinking these thoughts? Have they been given to me? Did I even create them on my own, or are these my own projections? Like, it's the old, am I being fooled? The Descartes, I think therefore I am. Like, okay, is that the only reason you are? There's a lot of time that's spent puzzling, and, and we have none of the notoriety either by what you're describing. And that's something that we know going into it as well. There's no way, like you're talking about, there's no way we're going viral. There's no way that we can invest in going viral, and there's no way we can influence going viral. We know that mechanism is infected and is entirely polluted and controlled. So we're also going into this with quite a, an existentialist type of, we're doing this for the process of doing it and for our own personal enjoyment and our dedication. And almost in that way you described earlier of like the Japanese ceremony, we're here for the Bushido. We're actually, we enjoy the conversation, but we're here for the Bushido of the conversation, right? It's like it doesn't matter. There's no winning now. We don't care. We're not like here for the win. We might get an inheritance. We might win the lottery. Someone might choose us, and a benevolent force might bring us to a different economic experience. But we're not going to come out of our current predicament and become like kings of the world. And we know that we're we're dealing in too much extraneous thought, too much esoteric thought to be popular in modern culture and pop culture. We're just not pop culture icons, and we're not even working towards that. So that's an interesting element of it as well. People are like, why do you still do comedy when you're not famous? Like that was ever part of it. And never for a moment, as soon as I started doing comedy, I realized, oh, is that what it takes to get famous? Yeah, well, I don't want to be involved in that. I don't want to be betrothed to anybody else's thought patterns or beliefs. So that's like immediately you're ruled out of that world. And that's, having to do what you're told. That's a big one, when you go on a show like Have I Got News for You or any of those, like you're told, what you can do, what you can't do. And whether or not you're told, that if you do or you don't, that's going to be the reason why you don't get invited back. So, by anybody's description, that's also accepting, as Hicks would call it, like that's advertising. When you can't just run with the thought in your head with the thread that's inspired you, you're now selling ketchup. There's no other way to look at that. And that's something that I would never accept as an individual, let alone a professional. So that's what's amazing about
that bit. I can't remember which special it's from, but that bit goes through my head so much where he's literally, anybody hearing advertising? Yeah, woo! Kill yourself. No. Fucking kill yourself. Totally. It plays around in my head so because I've never taken as entities I've created, events I've put on and stuff. I've taken sponsorship, but it's been a very strict contract. You get your exposure for that event. You are not attached to me. You don't get any restrictions on me. I can do whatever the fuck I want. I've never taken anything for me. I'm always my own voice, and it's very important to me. And anytime I get tempted of somebody being like I've been flown around. I've been put up in nice places. Take care of me. Yeah. But all they're doing is paying for my honesty. They want me around to go, Simpa, what about this? Simpa, what about this? And that's probably worth more than I give away for it. But I've slowed down doing that these days. But I have this thing of I don't want to break that thing. And every time I get tempted in a way to go, but a more comfortable life, I think of Bill Hicks. I do. I always think of that bit, and because he does what he distills toward the end of it is literally you are either being you or you are fucking selling shit for somebody else. That's the only, so you can be authentic. So I said, I think last week, there's a clip I made, a short last week, and I was like, Callie said, I'm more realistic. That was the guest from last week. And I went, oh yeah, fuck me, I'm a radical. I'll live in the fucking gutter. Because I will. I don't care. I'd sleep in the dirt in the woods for fun. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? The luxuries are nice every now and then, but it does me wrong. I've been put up in a fancy hotel room before, and I've literally been I'm uncomfortable. This has a bedroom and another room. There's a couch in my hotel room. What the fuck is this? Do you know what I mean? It's bigger than my house. Those kind of moments where I'm like, this isn't, you're not winning me over here, folks. You're just making me more uncomfortable. And I think it's that mechanism, as we spoke of before, it's authenticity. And I think is Jimmy Carr, again, he's getting a lot of shout-outs for some reason. He spoke of trauma of youth and sort of, again, I think somebody else spoke of it. It might have been Russell Howard, I think, or somebody, British comedian. Okay. And they spoke of this sort of thing of comedians are typically traumatized, that there's something in sort of youth, or there's something they have had an inability to express themselves, or an inability to sort of speak that truth, that when it becomes like a desire to the point where it accelerates beyond the norm. And then they find comfort in that, the stories comedians tell of oh yeah, me gran was sick, so I used to tell her jokes to keep her happy. I think that's Jimmy Carr speaks of on, not Lex, whoever's the podcast it was that he was on, about him and looking at basically making jokes to make his family situation better. And then from that, it was a way to deal with anxiety and nervousness in new situations and environments. And it's like training a muscle. And I think what happens is basically most of the stand-up comedians, even though they come to it late, I think it's still that muscle is getting active. They're training that over time. As you say, that's the homework, whether they're consciously doing it or not. Like, I'm not necessarily consciously just taking in the information for this, but if I've got 2 minutes, I'll find myself reading a Forbes article. I'll find myself like 17 pages into an academic study going, what the fuck am I doing? Do you know what I mean? And it's like, I'm taking it in, but I'm not, because I can't then recite it. Like, I read for about an hour and a half every night now. I've got a nice little fucking recline chair, over the top light, and I'm just going through my books. And every now and then I'll pause and go, but how did the last book end? And I have to like almost have a quiz to myself.
Yeah.
But then like 3 days later, I'll remember everything about it. So it's in there.
Nice.
And I think that's comedians do the same. Is you just got to take all of this stuff because you don't know what's useful in any given moment. There's Milton Jones and the other guy, Stuart Lee. I think they construct it's sentence, it's linguistical comedy. Do you know what I mean? Who's the other guy? Oh, I can't think of the other guy who does it. It's like dad jokes, short dad jokes. He's on ITV. He was in an ITV sitcom.
Tim Vine.
Yes, I think it was. Oh, Tim Vine's another one that does it. Yeah, there's quite a few. But yeah, but that's memory. They can bring stuff on the fly, and they obviously need a talent to be able to produce that. But that feels again more formulaic, and it may be authentic. But again, when I feel like I see a comedian and they're not, there's who I think they are because of what I've seen of them. But then when they enter a room and you're like, who the fuck are you almost? There's the human version of that. I love that shit. I love seeing like people do when they used to do the upstairs room, which I think where I first saw you, the gala, and it was like 150 max, I think. And people like Sarah Pascoe and that, they'd come and do used to do their pre-tour stuff, so they come work shit out. And like they turn up and they're not dressed to the nines of it all. It's not about the performance per se. It's about the relationship. Yeah. And they hang around and they'll talk the jokes through with the audience afterwards and shit. And that's like, that's the beauty of it. The humanization element is.
Yeah, the empathy of it. Yeah, totally. I love that element of it. That's I can't be that distilled formulaic person that you're describing. I can't. It's not interesting to me to achieve that. I admire those performers that you mentioned, but I've never ever wanted that to be. And I part of that early days was to protect against plagiarism. I wanted to be able to tell. I started to like construct jokes from a three-dimensional point of view. Like if I made a mistake and I foreshadowed a punchline, I realized that I could reconstruct the story, which essentially each joke is, to reveal information at different intervals. So, if you're looking at different like information particles or parcels within the joke, a punchline is only part of it. And in fact, like the setup can be as much of a punchline said rhetorically as the punchline itself. So you get
you plant the crumbs and you get that murmurance through an audience where you're about to deliver the punchline, but the smarter people laugh and then it causes that ripple and people go, oh, I get it. And then you still get to say it and have that crescendo of because it is like the human brain produces more neurochemicals and endorphins in the expectation of a thing than receiving the thing. So in that moment, it's like they get a double hit of it. They're like, I've got it and I'm ahead, and they're involved. And then you hit it again in the confirmation. It's like raw and every.
Yeah, and I like the organic nature where that can come out of something that you've already spoken of with the audience, or
recall comedy, like the Rule of Three.
So you get like fed something that reminds you of something else, and you and I know that when your brain thinks of something, it thinks conceptually, and suddenly you've got that concept, and you realize, I can actually feed in from a segue, a basic segue, but that doesn't necessarily come into the setup. It can come into the punchline, and then the setup, like you say, can be like disseminated, and the anticipation can be created out of that. And sometimes you can even, it can peter out without having a punchline ever mentioned because it's just an anecdotal story or, that.
I'm trying to think who did it. There's a few, who was the guy with the carrier bag? And the glasses and I can't remember. There was him and there was a few of the Angela. There's a few of that kind of subgroup of comedians that I'm just lobbing together, as it were. That they almost had like anti punchlines, and like you were saying, like the joke was told back, so they'd give you the thing, and it was rewarding the memory, as it were. Here's the thing, remember the thing in like storytelling. I think they call it like Asimov's gun. or
Yeah.
something like that. It's to do with like a rifle that was referenced in the early part of a story that then later on it's intrinsic, and it just means that you can't bring something into the third act unless you've peppered it in the
Yeah.
first and second acts, as it were,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
classic
Right.
storytelling. Yeah, yeah. And so what they would do is give you that thing up front and almost, gee, remember this? And then they'd construct it backwards, and then there'd be a self-deprecating thing at the end that would have been the start to the punchline, and it still gives the comedic effect, because then the listener reconstructs the joke almost in their head. And like you said, once you start to, if you almost like shuffle a two or three of them staggered together, and you start like, see, and the audience, it's almost, you want the confusion. So again, some of the best comedians are the ones that like, they'll roll a joke, like you said, over 20 minutes, and there'll be peaks of just getting them to laugh at a funny phrase or the way that or the juxtaposition or whatever, and they'll build to that thing and go on the absurd, and people almost forget that you're building to that, and then you suddenly slap them with it, and that's what most people close with, is that it's getting, because that gets your biggest reaction, and then you're down, you're off.
Good nabbing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I must make a note to Howard Marks there. I hadn't noticed throughout, and what a wonderful person he was. What a wonderful, wonderful energy he was. I had opportunity once I was knocked off my feet by him, and we did a festival together in Austria, in Meyerhofen, and I might have told you this before.
I think you did. You told us in February, about it.
Yeah, how crazy was that? Yeah,
the same the next day.
And then, the next morning, I'm in a hotel in Scotland, and you're just like sitting at the breakfast table beside. I was just like, holy shit, what are you doing here? Are you following me around, Howard? Yeah, I'd forgotten. Yeah, how very funny. Well, what a nice guy.
I think this, to go back to again your sort of thing, that without laying my belief on science or not, we were speaking about like germ theory or whatever, but I have found, they used to call it like the 6 degrees of separation, but certain people who are seeking, I don't want to say like truth in the esoteric class, I mean, we're like, but actual like knowledge and wanting to advance and better themselves, we gravitate towards each other in some ways. We reciprocally enjoy each other's work, whatever it be, at whatever levels. We find ourselves in these similar locales because we're driven by similar desires and wants.
Right.
And I think that in this modern age of social media, we can't, I mean, I'm just starting to try and get Durham events back up again for the similar thing for the cannabis community. Just like, if I can bring enough people together, it'll re-kickstart at least the local community of people to have each other's back again, to believe, to they're not against each other, they're the same fucking people. And I think I want to see the same thing in comedy, or even just live performances in general. There's just fuck all. I think like nearly 2/3 of venues since 2010, I can't read that paper in my head, but a chunk of venues in the UK are just gone, and more are facing the loss. So it's live music as well. It's these, because again, people get lost with the celebrity of, like, you are this thing, and it's like, no, you're a human that chose to do some things or ended up doing some things that then led to a thing that you appreciate. It's still a human with the vulnerability, no matter how confident and cocky and powerful they appear, going, it's like taking the picture to the mom going, do you like my picture? That's where the ego, to go back to it, comes from. That's where the defense comes from. That's where the craft and the power comes to it. Like, a lot of people will try comedy, and it takes balls to get on that stage the first time. I've thought about it, but I haven't done it. I've spoke on stages, and it's a different fucking thing. Trying to educate people and get my point across versus actually trying to get them to laugh. I do feel every now and then, though, when I do step off a stage and somebody laughs, I'm like, I can fucking do this. And then again, I think of what I know about the craft of comedy, because I've always, like I said, I've seen a lot of shows. I've watched probably 100 plus fucking different DVD specials and all sorts. And I love the craft of it. I love to see how different people use language, use expectation, use juxtaposition, use all of these different means to reach the commonality of, in that moment while we are laughing, there is nothing else. Do you know what I mean? Like, there is no politics, no war, no divide, no class. Do you know what I mean? The guy with the fucking Bugatti outside and the guy that took the bus you're laughing at the same thing. It's a leveler, a universal leveler, and I think the loss of it
and not preconceived as well. Yeah, like it catches the person laughing off guard. That's what I most love about it as well. It's the most honest emotional response. Not that others aren't, but it's like, it's not contrived in any way. If you're laughing, there's a nirvana within that. There's a whatever they say is the best medicine. It's very freeing for the soul to have that. And it's one of the things I most like, probably, why I gravitated to comedy in a way. You're talking about Jupiter's like creasing himself on stage. That's like, I love laughing. I absolutely love laughing. And it's such a cathartic experience to have. And maybe I realized in comedy, I'd be laughing more than if I wasn't. You're either looking for the laugh or you're surrounded by people who have found it. And that's a real, a nice environment to be in. I always say it's nice to make money through that. It's very honest money to make, people, as far as like exchanges go, it's the closest thing to prostitution that isn't like sullying of your sexual, maybe there is something sexual in it, but it's like there's a very honest exchange there. People laugh, it's solemn, they've done it naturally. They allow you to have some of their hard-earned cash in other respects, and I've always felt really comfortable about that. It's probably why I can't stop doing it, because it's very addictive that way. It feels very nice to be paid to make people feel good for even as we've discussed, if it's only for like a finite period of time, it still feels nice. It's an achievement in itself in this like hideous world in many ways,
So do we think that it's a perceptual issue? Because in my head there was this kind of topic of like, is the reason there is this backlash and this division and political polarization, it is to do with perception of laughing at and laughing with. And I think that a lot of people that end up in this victim complex, ever decreasing cycle, zero sum game, anything that they identify with then becomes protected to them. So you can't mock it. When all that then does is it makes the walls higher, it makes the darkness darker. We mock power. We mock, God. I've held hands with dying people laughing when they're dying, like they're going to be gone in a day or two, and they are just so alive and with it in the moment, because like, yeah, man, I'll say I the big guy for you. Do you know what I mean? They're just, there's something there that needs to be brought back. Just this universal humanity that we all fucking have. You can think of the worst person that you can think of, and they were the protagonist of their own narrative. They were the hero. As I said this the other day about like Dharma, he was like, oh, that kid that I decapitated. I don't know. In his head, he might have thought he'd stop in the next Hitler. Yeah. He's not just going to wake up that day and go, I'm going to be bad and evil against my own morals. No, that's not how the human experience works. But then when we have this space where then there's the other, and like you said, the collision of these bubbles, it smooths off and rounds our edges. If you then challenge me on why I believe that I'm not, God, I was going to use it. This is an example. If you'd have challenged me, say, if I didn't believe in the Holocaust, do you know what I mean? And you would have then go, well, why not? Then it should be the emphasis on me should be to then provide and defend my point, as it were. And if I then can't do that without falling into aggression and ad hominem attacks against you, then I should feel embarrassed and question that belief. Do you know what I mean? But then it should then that then leads to this oppositional thing of a fight versus belief, when we've eloquently shown it. There's several things that we, almost on a polar opposite on the spectrum, as it were, seem to disagree with. Yet still entirely amicable, friendly, decent conversation. Neither one of us at any point has felt the need, like aggressive or to try and take down the other or lord or all of these mechanisms. And I think that's because we've both experienced a lot of other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very odd that that current paradigm. It's just that the division is just grim. It's really actually, to get back to the show that we're creating right now. It's called FRNG News Desk, and it's we're trying to span that. We're trying to span exactly what you described, Simpa, that chasm that seems to have taken place, and attacking those who would manipulate both sides rather than those who are manipulated. And I guess there's a humility that comes with being able to accept that you're manipulated. And I think that's probably why we can continue to converse on topics that we don't entirely agree upon, because we understand that we're being manipulated at all periods, at all times, to our own beliefs that we believe are our beliefs once we arrive at them, for the time that we think they're there, that they're there, that they're ours. So, not everybody has arrived at that place for themselves to realize that they're tricked. And
Yeah.
and maybe that's the future. Enough people will be led to disillusionment that they'll accept that that's not the path that they want to go down anymore. Oh yeah, I don't know what that future is, because like if it's the generation alphas that you're describing, maybe, that come to that conclusion, it'll probably be dancing on our graves.
Yes. I, I, people obviously say I'm a doom and gloom people. I've had guests say before, "Oh, you're real negative and whatever else." I'm like,
Really?
I'm not. I'm a die-hard romantic optimist. I wouldn't sit here, give my life and done what I've done for the amount of years that I have, and give what I give if I didn't believe that shit can get better.
Yeah.
It's the power isn't in systems. The power isn't in governments. To quote
Yeah.
Terence McKenna, culture isn't your friend. And as you described, corporations and corporate capture of anything isn't good. That is there to profit the people above it by keeping the people below it. That's
Yeah.
just how any enterprise sort of works.
Yeah.
And my honest belief is that I don't know how it happens, but that just enough people come to the recognition that, again, I could sit like, this probably get me in fucking trouble, but I don't know. Like I probably have sat with an actual Nazi, someone who has Nazi beliefs and is like, no, fucking Hitler was the fucking G. Yeah, Mein Kampf is my shit. Do you know what I mean? But if they've never mentioned it to me, I've never fucking known.
Yeah.
But then if we then had to have a conversation, we can have to then. As I said before, them speaking on a subject. I'm not different to say offline is not platforming. That's a whole different kind of bigger conversation. But just one-on-one with a person, like everybody should be free to express everything to another. Because if you're embarrassed to share your belief to another, again, check your fucking belief. That's what I'm so confused about in this world. That duplicitous nature of you used to have your work life and your home life, and now it's like your work life, your home life, and your online life. And that's become the only thing. Is we're all celebrities. We're all Z-list celebrities apparently, and everyone's just waiting to capture each other and screw each other over. And it's, I just, again, I hope just enough people go. I don't give a fuck. Are you a practicing Nazi? You might believe that Hitler was good, but are you going to try and kill Jews? Are you trying to kill disabled people? Are you trying to form with your brothers and put a red, like, burn crosses? Like, no. If you, like I said, I have the same thing again with fucking pedophiles. Like, there's a difference between thought and action. Because then if we create a mechanism by which you go, oh, well, that person thought about kids, that means that technology is applied to everybody for every fucking thing. It's a slippery slope. Thoughts have to be protected. You can think the most heinous things about another. Action or then inciting onto others and getting others involved is the fucking problem. And I think that instead of us being locked in our bubbles, in our algorithms, never doing nothing, seeing each other, that's going to get worse. Your worst belief will get worse because it won't be challenged. We need to challenge each other, not in a, you're a dickhead because you believe this. I can't make that judgment if you're a dickhead. You might be acting a dick to me, in my opinion, and I can express that. But it's the language, like you said, it's become not just spelling, but it's locked. We're just throwing sentences at each other. Whereas before, like you said, I think in concepts. And at the last second, luckily, it comes out in words. It's like, thank God, you know what I mean? And but it's the way those words and the meaning, as you were saying, that change this shit. Is it definitive, closed language? Do you know? As I said, I can inquire about your belief rather than being like, oh, you believe that? Do you know what I mean? It's this whole. Honesty, transparency. It's gonna fucking change the world, but it means we have to see what they've been doing. And I don't mean that now the tinfoil globalists. I mean, it's not. The globalist has become such a captured word, but just look at the industries, look at how they operate, look at things like the UN, the World Health Organization, international conglomerates. That's just how life works. Borders are only a border for the fucking people, folks, and maybe trade tariffs. But for the higher levels of corporations and the elites that actually run this shit, no, they don't fucking exist. But until enough of us get together and recognize it's them lot and their sickness, because again, I want to, and I struggle with this, humanize that other enemy. Sorry, humanize the other rather than turn them into an enemy. Because I feel that they're victims. They're just victims in Ferraris, but they're still having that Ferrari means that these fuckers don't have cars. Do you know what I mean? Them hiding away their billion means these million don't have thousands.
Yeah.
It's in a finite systems, the more shit they have, and it is like, I see it as an illness. You see the meme sometimes, and it says, if we saw in a zoo a monkey hoarding 1,000 bananas, we would say that, there's something wrong with that monkey because all the other monkeys haven't got bananas. Yet when humans do that, we put them on the covers of magazines.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's the power is in the people. As I say, I don't believe in, what is it? Terence used to say, follow plants, not people.
Yeah.
Because whenever I can't decide something, I'll go quiet. I'll go find somewhere and I can smoke some DMT. I can take some mushrooms in the woods. Even if I'm taking no drugs, I'm just sitting by the fire. I'm taking as much of the stimulation of the reality away, and I'm going to that space and that moment to try and understand further that which I can't surmount right now. And I think
I'm
more people
fast.
need that.
I'm
Yeah.
a totally mentally and bodily.
Even
Absolutely.
meditation, yoga, any of these things that put you is the hippie parlance of back in your body. Any of that is so good for you because you can start to feel that you are not your ego. You are not your thoughts. Do you know what I
Self-respect.
mean? Yeah.
Oh, totally. I get it.
We do. No, we're doing. We've done quite a bit here, Craig. I've got
Yeah.
a couple of quick fires, if that's all right, and then we'll sort of round up.
Nice.
Sweet. As I said, there's quite a crossover in the Venn diagram of like cannabis consumers
Oh
and
yeah.
sort of comedians.
Yeah.
So a few venues in the UK have sort of been hosting various people, and there's I think it's Smile Comedy Club
Okay.
down in Birmingham. So I don't know if any of you guys are listening. Hopefully you are, but if not, if there's other people in my audience that might be thinking they'd like to go into stand up, I know we've just kind of been a bit derisive and jokey about everybody believing they can be a comedian. But for anybody like really wanting
Yeah.
to take it seriously in
Power
this
to you if you can. Yeah.
in this day and age, where would they sort of start?
I always push when I'm asked, and thank you for asking, to not be precious about the environment that you perform in. So the audience doesn't know that you're going to tell them jokes. So go to your local karaoke night. Go to a poetry night. Go to any night that you are able to publicly speak for whatever the description of the evening is. Don't be at all caught up in it needing to be a stand-up night, needing to be an amateur night, any of that. Because the other thing that's most important, and what Simpa was lamenting about what's happened across society, the evisceration of public performance houses is stark. So you have to be far, far more diverse in where you choose to get on stage. And I'm talking like, public speaking boxes anywhere. And that's important because as Andrew Maxwell once famously said, or maybe infamously said, you have to get to a point where being off stage feels weirder than being on stage. So people, feel like they have anxiety when they're on stage. You have to be on stage enough. You have to have that microphone in your hand enough. You have to be performing enough and regularly enough that not performing feels weird. That's when you're anxious and odd, and actually speaking in front of people feels like your natural state. And of course, that's hyperbolic to the actual reality, but as close to that as you can achieve is what you need. And that's, when they say someone's a natural, that's all that they've done is they've been on stage enough and in enough different environments and enough different variable environments that's the impression that they give off. So that's something I'd say right away. You want to if you're doing an amateur night, particularly if you're allowed or if you're able to get on stage like weekly or bi-monthly or whatever you're able to get on, an amateur night wants to have you and you get to do your 5 minutes twice a month or wherever that venue is. Your actual project, your actual job, and what should be your focus is getting on stage in as many other places as possible with that 5 minutes that you plan to knock their socks off with when you finally get on stage at your amateur night. You want that to be run in and polished, and that's through. And I wouldn't restrict. And something else that I always recommend, particularly to young comedians, don't worry about the environment being a stage and a microphone. Literally, you have to become, and it's hard to do in your hometown or it's hard to do in your home environment, which is why a lot of comedians move away so that they can become the persona that they want to be on stage everywhere that they are without feeling like they're restricted by the anxiety of their, of their cloistered, friendship circles, family circles particularly can pressurize a lot of people to not be experimental with all that we've been talking about through this podcast of the necessity to put yourself on the line, to say things that you don't actually believe or feel strongly about, just to see the reaction, to be able to comedically react to that or create something more comedically profitable from that experience. So it's hard to do that in front of, you can't scream "I love Hitler" to your family at a Sunday dinner, right? It's, but you can do it on a bus. So, these are the differences, that you want to work with. You want to, like, you're basically going to be inciting audience reaction, whether it's comedic or not. Your reaction to it or your development of it is intended to be comedic. So I always say, if you can't get on stage at the karaoke night or a poetry night or whatever, go to like tell it to the teller at ASDA, tell it to the bus driver, tell it to, people who you're in transient, tell it to people at a bus stop. Sit down, pretend you're waiting for the bus. Tell them your joke. Tell them the joke that you intend to do on, 10 past 10 on a Thursday night in 2 weeks' time. Tell them that joke. And make sure that by the time that you're telling it in 2 weeks' time on a comedy stage, in a comedy environment, that you have confidence behind the response that it's going to get, because you've told it 20 times that week in various different environments, and 18 times out of that 20 times, it's got a great response. And the other 2 times you think in your head, they probably didn't hear it correctly, or you didn't tell it correctly, or a horn went off and something infected the environment, which is something, again, in terms of advice to comedians, be aware of the environment. If a waiter drops a tray of drinks in the middle of your setup, know that setup isn't like established now. So you either repeat verbatim your setup for whatever your joke intention is, or the best thing to do, as we spoke of earlier, that 3-dimensional telling of a story mentality, is you want to retell the setup without retelling the setup. So use your analogies, use your synonyms, use your wordplay to make sure that you're getting the same idea across, which is the information that's necessary for people to hold in their head in anticipation of the joke that's coming. You tell it in a different way, so it doesn't sound like you're being, overly rote. You don't want to sound polished. So you want to have a lot of different ways, including, punchlines can be quite firm. A lot of comedians are very secure in the necessity of the precision of, you mentioned a Milton Jones or a Tim Vine. These are precise punchlines that are told to precise setups, but not everybody has that forum and format, or style. So, if you're like I am, you have 100 different ways you can tell the setup, and the punchline can be a derivative of 3 or 4 different ways. Make sure that you know those ways. Make sure going in, that's your homework. You want to be able to retell the joke 100 different ways. If it gets interrupted or if you mess up the setup, you want to make sure that you don't have to be married to the exact format to make the joke work. So these are all things that you can do off stage. The more work that you do off stage, the more investment in time that you do off stage to get ready for that, the time that you're on stage and you're going to be nervous, the better off you are. And the more that you practice and polish before you actually get to the night that you think it really matters, big night when they're all watching you, you want to make sure that night feels like the night before and the night before that and the night before that. And it all just blends into one, and nothing's more special than the other. And you're comfortable and your heart rate isn't like too elevated, and you're not in a stressful place, because as Simpa and I have discussed this evening, people you don't think well when you're stressed. Trauma-based mind control means you stop thinking as soon as that trauma hits. And for comedians, that's the anxiety of the environment of the evening, a heckle that catches you off guard, that unbalances you. That's your trauma. That's your actual, that's the cortisol release. And that means you're in fight or flight. You're no longer thinking of funny punchlines, funny threads, new ways to tell a new joke. You're now thinking, where's the emergency exit in this place? How can I escape through the roof? Is there a hole in the floor? These are all things that you only think about when you're traumatized. So you want to take away the trauma from the environment and the experience by being extremely experienced in that environment before you get to ones that are going to be incrementally more difficult, more pressure, more people watching. There's a big agent in the crowd. No way. There's a booker. The guy from Belgium's here. No, all this crap that's going on in the heads of comedians. You need that all to be smoothed out. You need all the big bumps on the road to become, straight highway that you're in charge of, and then you can make decisions much easier, and you're essentially the progenitor of the future. And you don't got to get a God complex about that, but you're creating the narrative to anticipate the responses. And the more that you can keep that in your control, within your control power, the less likely it's going to go poorly for you. So that's something to think about. Things to think about.
Yeah, that's some excellent stuff. I mean, obviously not as a comedian, but I've publicly spoke at quite a lot of different events. I suppose around the world. I spoke in America, and yeah, I understand that feeling of what you described. Like, I'm more uncomfortable hanging around on the stage waiting for the mic. As soon as the mic's in my hand and I can speak,
Yeah.
zen. Oh,
Yeah.
and one of the things that I learned quite quick, and I always see the audio technician panic, is I enunciate. I don't bellow, but I form across the way my chest like opens. I really get the airflow through when I speak.
Yeah.
And in the cadence that you first approach, the tone and everything else immediately sets how that crowd is going to respond to you. You can feign confidence in that environment by the way that you take it. You can stop them dead in their tracks, and you can hold them. But I think that's another element that's not just as important for stand-up comedy. It's obviously important for stand-up comedy, but it's translatable into other life. But I think if you publicly speak, it's learning that mastery of presence and of owning that thing, as you said. And I think repetition builds that over time. And then I think another one is I guess your audience. From what I've sort of observed, there are certain rules. So the rule of three. So you reference a thing, you kind of over the series of the act, you'll come back to it, and by the third, we get a crescendo. I do it when I speak. You'll notice that people, when I write, the way that I write using an Oxford comma and 3 spacing of words, because it's Churchill. It's the most powerful way of speaking. It's literally rhetoric. They still teach it in Eton here in the UK. It's like basically the art of the emotional manipulation through language, and comedy lends quite a bit to that. If you ever notice, like politicians and comedians, there's something similar in the sense, not necessarily what they're saying, but in like the presentation and the cadence and the structure of the language. And I think, another one is like recall, like we were saying, and plants. Some of the really good ones that I love, and you can see the craft of it. You're like, you're a fucking veteran. They'll walk out, ask a few people, and they'll go, right, you're going to be our, sorry for the language, people, designated slut. Do you know what I mean? That's a loose woman or whatever. So you're going to be anything that comes with sexual. Oh, Barbara. Then you've got he's the bricky, he's the lad. So, Dave. And they'll pick a few people. And as it goes, and in those interactions, that's the easy hit. It's just hitting that high note. And people are like, yes, because you've referenced the thing. So again, you're tying it in. I think that knowing...
Tom Stade is a master of that. If you've ever seen Tom Stade.
Yes. I've been considering reaching out to him to see if I could get him on the podcast if he's approachable.
He's right up the alley of your podcast, and he's a master at what you've just described. The orchestration of a fictional environment that he creates. Wonderful.
It's like being drunk. I remember the last time I walked out of there was just like shell-shocked almost, and the crowd moved with it. If people like, we're in Durham? We're English? We're Northern? What is what? Like people just like rediscovering themselves because, like you say, it's from moment one he captured the audience, and again it's like those. I don't like watching comedy where you can almost feel time. Do you know what I mean? But as soon as you're not a body, you're just watching somebody perform, and it's like dance, it's like poetry, it's an art form in and of itself that you don't even, like I said, need to appreciate the jokes per se, but to watch a human have that eloquence. Sure. Yeah, like a lot of people in linguistics speak of the positive acumens, and I'm sorry, again, we've referenced the Nazis a lot, of like Hitler's speeches. People study Hitler's speeches because, again, it's as an orator, as a speaker, he could make you believe fucking anything. He sells to Eskimos, as they say. Do you know what I mean? People with that patter, that control, to study that kind of... I'm not saying comedians go study Hitler. Jesus Christ. You can tell that this is all a bit all over the place. But you get what I'm trying to say here, folks, is that look at people that speak well, people that command attention, and look at the way that they speak and how they speak, and don't copy others. Like I've seen it, whenever you see, like, say, or it used to be, someone would get booked on Mock the Week, and then everyone would do like their main punchline to be a version of that kid's joke that got them on there. And it just distilled down, and again, it became that formulaic thing, and it just lost that authenticity. And I suppose
AI.
It just becomes regenerative. Whereas like I said, seeing the random guys that get on, and they usually have like more of an amateur on, and usually a veteran, and then somebody you've never heard of is generally like your three structure of like the comedy store, and I think there's another comedy hour or something that they do.
Oh,
Um, but yeah, the you get again the diversity of it. Everyone can go. If you just watch Michael McIntyre, the comedy you would try and produce, I guess, would be like Michael McIntyre. I, as a writer, have to be very mindful if I read a great book and then go, I want to fucking write something. And then I'm like, I'm just writing a shit version of Huxley, or I'm
yeah.
just writing a shit version of Bates or whatever. Like, I'm not. It's hard to separate. Is it who describe fucking Oscar Wilde? You know, there is nothing unique and original about me. Everything that is composed of me is made of others. I think that's not the correct quote, but it's along those lines. But it's one of those recognitions of those things, like you're saying, and add that sense of vulnerability. Because I've seen, I can't remember who it was. I saw one comedian snap one time and walk off stage. It's the only time I've ever seen it, other than actually in the Chilling Rooms in Liverpool. They booked three local comedians, and the Chilling Rooms is a smoking cannabis club, like a coffee shop. And so there's like 30, 40 people in there just blazing bats all day. Then the comedians start coming in, so there's like 50, 80 people, 50 to 60. No, how big's the seating? That's about three quarters. Yeah, it was about 60 odd people. And by the time the comedians like got to the mic, these guys, two of them didn't smoke weed. Like one of them ended up just fucking walking off because no one was laughing at him because he was like trying to make like cannabis jokes, but against us and not like inclusive of us.
Yeah.
You know, it was like he was doing like reefer madness bits from the 1950s. But other than that, I can't remember who this other one was that walked off. And it was this ego protection thing. It was like they were made vulnerable in a moment, and rather than using the defense of what a comedian is to then find the humor in that and actually self-deprecate and go lower and go, oh, you think that's funny, and take themselves down. You either eviscerate the heckler or you kind of go down, like you said, and you build it back up through your own three-dimensional layering. But the people that get offended, like, oh, offended by it, it's the same like we were saying, when the audience gets offended by it, it breaks down the dance. You're stopping the music.
Mm-hmm.
You're almost not supposed to think, and that's not to say don't judge comedy, because comedy is a vessel for truth, as we were describing before. But at the same, like, take it in as it is. Understand it for what it is. Maybe if you're offended right now, you haven't had the punchline. Maybe there's layering in the building, and even if you have still, like, even if you didn't get it, it doesn't mean the comedian was bad. Doesn't mean the joke was bad. Do you know what I mean? I just wish there was some more humility within this than arbitrary individuals that I went out to one comedy club. I saw this one guy, he's a dick. So then his 10 mates don't go see that guy. And it's just, and that social media has turned that to 11, to borrow the Spinal Tap phrase. And there are so many decent comedians that I've seen that, again, I leave literally hurting, like a lower rib there, like the muscle from contracting is fucking hurting, like split lips from fucking dry mouth. From just, do you know what I mean? And you're like, why aren't you anywhere and everywhere? And it's as you've alluded to throughout this, they didn't jump through the right hoop. I'm not going to say they didn't suck the right dick, but that does lead me on to my other kind of question. Maybe not a quick fire one, but we'll see. Obviously, there was the whole Harvey Weinstein thing that in America that sort of increased and made the public awareness of this like Me Too movement. Obviously, just for continuity's sake, unfortunately, it is looking like he is going to be released. His, I think, LA case has been overturned, which means that the evidence in the other one is likely, so he'll probably be freed. But there's a long way of going around. That was film and TV, etc. Catherine Ryan obviously made some comments when all the allegations about Russell Brand, and we'll leave that. I'm not commenting on that's an active police investigation, whatever. I maybe think some of the things he's done are a bit crazy, but everyone's a bit fucking crazy. Again, no moral judgment. But she basically intimated that there is still predatory behavior within the scene. And it obviously, as a male, it's different than asking you, I guess, if you were a female comedian, because I guess there's this whole different paradigm of things. But do you see these kind of gatekeeping, I guess, is a way of describing it? Like you said, that there's certain mechanisms and things or boxes that must be ticked in order to, rise through the ranks.
Yeah, wow. I guess, I've come into the ranks sort of at a different rank, because I'm like, I'm thinking back to like Canada days when I was very young in the business, and I kind of, I arrived in the UK established, so I didn't have to like really, as you say, suck it to rise along. But I wouldn't relish being like young at it now, that's for sure. But at the same time, again, I'm thinking back to like my Canada days, and I didn't ever experience any like sexual uh,
Harassment?
extortion or harassment, but I knew of it. I knew of it like, taking place, but I knew of it more as it crossed over into like acting and the bigger money, like the people that I know that went Hollywood essentially, and some of their experiences and what but again, you're only going by what you're told, unfortunately, I guess at that point I'm now questioning victims or, what victims have told me.
Mm.
But but I guess I am in some ways questioning that because like they're not, they might be vulnerable adults, but they weren't vulnerable children, for example. So I and some of the people that I'm like closest with still would concur, I think, in saying that these people were like, um, not I guess complicit parties, like, just because they were like living with a sugar daddy, for example, didn't mean that they were being raped, for example.
Yeah,
So,
no, I think
yeah, and they might be uncomfortable with the relationship as it like interacts with overlapping social scenes, including like I would be like a fractured piece of a partition of a social environment. So I'm having relayed to me that they have a discomfort with this relationship that provides them with sustenance. But maybe they're only telling me because they think I would have a problem with them doing that or feeling like they weren't a complicit party in that relationship. So that stuff took place. But I also realized, like looking back, when I went into auditions, that I realized I probably was being groomed for my sexual vulnerability. And thankfully I didn't get like exploited, not at least beyond that experience. But there's a term called chicken hawk. I don't know if you've heard that before, but in the like in the homosexual community, somebody who preys on particularly, I think, straight young men. There's all kinds of terms within that environment, that community, but that is one of the terms, and it's something that's famously rife in Hollywood. There's no greater attainment for the chicken hawk than getting, popping the cherry of a straight young, especially aspiring actor in the business.
I was just going to mention. All I was going to say there was three words: P Diddy allegedly.
Well, here we go. Yeah. So, but I think what we're talking about though also is in every human endeavor. It's in business.
Yeah.
People get attainment through their hook or by crook. And
it's power dynamics.
Power dynamics.
The modern parlance, yeah, isn't it? So it's I think to kind of clarify and to real sort of steel man what you said before, in case anybody decides to misinterpret it, or at least to verify what I believe I heard there. Is that there is a huge difference between coercion and rape. Rape is the violent, forcible, sexual copulation, for lack of a better word, or sexual. There's a difference. It's argued between whether rape is penetrative or not. I'm not going to fall into that fucking debate, but it is committing a sexual assault upon another. Coercing a person into it is still heinous and fucking wrong. But that mechanism, I mean, you could argue about like OnlyFans and things like this at this point. And it's the argument of whether it's empowerment versus exploitation. And this a strong paradigm obviously playing out there. But as you say, it's how it's kind of always been. And I'm not justifying it. I'm not being misogynistic or fucking supportive of the patriarchy here, folks. That's not what I'm saying. But as you say, there is a physical power disbalance. The average man is stronger than the average woman. Like there's a thing gone viral recently, man versus bear. And so it started on TikTok page, I think. I don't have TikTok, so I kind of got it through third-hand information. And it was basically some woman shared a thing. I think it was, they asked like 10 women, would they rather be in the woods alone with a man or in the woods alone with a bear?
Wow.
And 9 out of 10 women said the bear. And obviously this has blown up huge discourse in society because, as you say, there's now contrarians that blow that up. So how many of those women were just being like, yeah, fuck the men, fuck the patriarchy, and this kind of oppositional, divisional, separate? Like, in actual reality, when you put them in the woods, what would they then prefer? And the arguments made are things like, well, we don't know what percentage of men are rapists. We don't know what percentage of men would assault us, would harm us. And they then go, well, at least, and then the argument is that we at least know what the bear would do. And so it's obviously it's blown up, and I feel it's manufactured. Personally, I feel the TikTok will be fake, the data will be fake. All of it is designed to cause exactly what it's doing, and the reaction that you're causing now is so then we all go, oh well, this versus this. It's like none of it is fucking material and relevant, because what you say in a survey, what you say on the internet, what you perform. Even this, what I'm saying, this is in some way censored, folks. There's still various things I cannot fucking say. That's not to say that I won't necessarily even want to say these things, but I have to be mindful of the language that I use and straying into various subject matter that then just for bringing it up, I'm fucked. Do you know what I mean? Regardless of even having it, I couldn't be able to do what I did before. And or they're both sizing it. Oh, you're being a centrist. Or I'm a radical. No, I have my beliefs, but this is the remit of a certain discourse is what I aim for this podcast. But then privately, people should, like I said before, be able to talk about whatever the fuck they want. And if we don't, this is how you end up with exploitation. The whole Me Too point of that was women supporting each other. Yeah, I was. And yes, some of that may have been captured and women just getting on with it. And as people jump on hashtag trends, I say this as someone as a victim to hashtag trends. I fell for Coney in 2012. I'm a bitch. I know. But, it's like we all have that moment. We all have our Coney, our thing where we realize that a lot of these things are captured, artificially created. They're not, you're not giving any power towards what you really think that you are. There are some movements that really do deserve our everything and for people to sacrifice. But unless we get together and recognize, wait, 9 out of 10 of us believe that thing, let's do something about it. So again, to all the men out there, and I'm sorry this is going to sound like a third wave feminist and you're cooked and whatever, fuck you guys, I don't give a shit. The point of that, surely, is we as men should read that and go, in a generation, we want less of those 9 out of 10 women to choose the fucking bear. The bear will still be fucking in the woods and want to fucking eat whatever it finds. Granted, there's less bear attacks and statistical anomalies, but the point should be that instead of you going, let's get in our masculine camp and fuck these ladies, let's bridge that divide, man. Do you know what I mean? We need each other in everything. And I mean that across the sexual gender divide. I mean that across the socioeconomic divide. I mean that across the religious belief divide. Some of the funnest conversations I've had have been with Christians. Like radical Christians, because them motherfuckers, they'll just debate shit. And they'll just go, yeah, but Jeebus. And I'll be like, and then go spaghetti monster or whatever. And we'll laugh. Do you know what I mean? And again, Bill Hicks, and he does that whole thing. And he's like, he says, oh, what, you offended to the Christians in the audience? And he goes, what are you going to do? Forgive me?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? We need that. We need to be able to poke fun at each other and laugh at each other's eccentricities.
Open discourse.
Yes, because then we know what the normal shit is. Again, to borrow South Park, and this will be my last sort of bit on this. South Park did a special, The Cartoon Wars, and it was basically like Simpsons, Family Guy, and South Park, and it's like a multi-part episode. And Family Guy South Park take the piss out of Family Guy by saying their writers are manatees that live in a giant water tank with all these balls of subjects, and the manatees pick the balls and they put them into a random generator, and that creates a Family Guy joke. And it's about censorship and Muhammad and his depiction. And it was about when Matt and Trey were trying to show Muhammad on Comedy Central, and they got this huge fucking farava because it was around Charlie Hebdo and the Islamist extremist attacks on the newspaper in France, so the cartoonist in France. And brain, go back. Where the hell are we? Fucking in the episode, so they remove a ball, they remove Muhammad, and so the fucking manatees refuse to write any jokes. And that's where we're at. Is either everything is on the fucking table or nothing is on the table. And the world where you can't laugh at me, you can't laugh at my teeth. Yes, I have a big gap in my teeth. If I can't be humble in that and take that. You can't laugh at that. What fucking reality are we really in, Greg? Do you know what I mean? If you're fat, own that you're fat. If you really care about it, try and do something about it. If you can't, then own that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Be comfortable with what you are. That's what I was saying about your beliefs before. Like, be proud to be who you are. And if you're not proud of who you are, then fucking change. You're capable. You're not a fucking rock. You're not stationary. This is not your final destination in life. And again, that's what comedy helped me with in those years when I was locked in my flat and so terrified to leave the world, was seeing these people and laughing with these other people and not caring that guy might have, he's got $100,000 fucking $100,000 fucking salary and he's married and kids and his life's successful or this or that. And that judgment and that, the thing that you do to yourself amongst others is gone. And I feel that if that's lost to the future generations, like I said, them Gen Alphas, man, them iPad kids are coming for us. No
Yeah,
offense to the iPad kids out there.
the victim culture needs a counterweight for sure. There's a comedian named Tanya Lee Davis that people can look up, and I think she's technically a dwarf, but old days midget. And she's a friend of mine from Canada.
Blonde lass.
Yeah,
Blonde. Yeah, I think I've seen it.
Yeah, she's spectacular, and she like her battles have been manifold. She fought for many years while she was living in the UK, particularly versus British Rail, trying to get I was about to say wheelchair, but she's not in a wheelchair, like a cart, the like I don't know what you call them.
Scooters, like the electronic scooters, the ride-on scooters.
Scooter access. She'd just be in the middle of nowhere, and Manchester, Leeds, fucking Norwich, you name it, 2 a.m, trying to change trains that she's paid for a ticket for, but she's like not allowed on it because they don't have scooter access at the station she's at, or the train that's arrived doesn't allow scooters, or there's somebody there's not the right employee on that knows how to work the door that the scooters come into, or just all this nonsense, and people yelling at her because she's taking up the place of a baby buggy, and real like heavy stuff. And you bear in mind that this little lady, if you watch like her trials and tribulations, you look at her back catalog of experiences and her speaking about her experiences, you can see the just literal like pile of hell that she regularly had to go through and has to go through still to this day at airports all over the world, just to get to tell jokes, just to get to like the comedy place. You were talking earlier about, what do young comedians have to do? All you got to do is worry about like how to be funny on the night that you're hired to be funny. You don't even have to dream about like not being able to get on a train or be able to get on a bus or be able to get your flight at an airport because you got the wrong, vehicle that you need to be able to like function in your daily life when you get to the hotel that you can't reach the door handle for and can't have a shower because the fucking controllers are too high for you, and like all this stuff. There's like real like struggle, actual difficult struggle before a joke even begins, before the opening gambit of a comedy show starts. So I think that those are like inspiring people. If we're talking about like Generation Alpha or anybody who thinks like the world is against them, it's probably good to watch like people who are not just hilarious when they get there, but people who are inspiring in the fact that they were able to get there of their own volition. And I'm talking about like it's not like she has handlers or something. It's not like she's got a group of people that are helping her get on a train whenever arrives. She's like on her own. She's a little lady, with like myriad health problems that are a product of her condition, of her like, being born the way she is, and her hip problems, her joint problems, and her pain regarding that. And still, she got to, just like, any comedian we can talk about tonight, she got to get to those shows on her own, just like it's quite easy. I'm riven with arthritis. I can't take a motorbike anymore, but like I'm not in that kind of struggle. And I think these are, sort of the inspirations of the future, people who like have to go through a lot more than you and I do, and probably the majority of your listeners do, before they actually get to what they think their struggle is.
Yeah. And I think as we were talking about like authenticity, that's why it's more important that we have people that are not typical. And I mean typical in the old English sense. I don't mean that in a judgment sense, but people that take the massive people, their voices are, I don't want to say more important, but they're more important, especially to the championing of the participation of that group, of that difference, whatever that difference is. And I think it kind of felt it got captured here in the UK. So the setup, was it Last Leg?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think who was the comedian who's got the prosthetic in the one leg, and then there was the other guy who's got it's a huge word. Yeah. I know what word it is, but I can't begin to pronounce it. It's like his arms are not grown properly. Yeah. They're not like fully formed. Sorry, I'm trying not to be offensive here because obviously there's no offense intended at all. But but they were a good platform to then do exactly that. Like there was the young lassie, the deaf comedian, she's doing quite a lot. She was sort of championed onto that, I believe, and it was a space where they could bring emerging talents that otherwise, like you said, that people would discount purely because they're not typical in the horrible sense of the word, or normal in the modern sense of the word. Do you know what I mean? And so I think them being able to champion their experience and show the humanity of it it allows us to then share. We now know, oh yeah, shit, that knob would be too high, or the handle, or the things that we never even begin to think of. Once you can see the world through the struggles of the other, you start to understand that the world isn't yours. And I mean that in the sense of, oh, what do you mean? Like, no, it's not yours. It's ours. It's fucking ours. We're all experiencing this shit, granted in our own different way, but it's the collective effort. So if enough of us realized that that's a problem, instead of just, oh yeah, everyone's got a ramp now, disabled's fixed. Have you seen the state of some of these things with the fucking ramps you can't get up because of the angle, the access that are electronic that don't fucking work? Like you said, then where's your disabled access hotel room that should be in every hotel room? Where's the this? Where's the... Those things only come to light because we know those people exist. And comedy, like I said, literature, sorry, tripping over my tongue, is another form where the voices of the other, the different, and again, I say that in a neutral sense, should be championed and highlighted because it allows us to not go blind to, well, of course everyone can walk, of course everyone can reach, of course everyone can this, of course everyone, because then you can otherize and demonize and vilify anybody if you forget that they are just you in a different fucking guise. They were born you, raised as you, thought as you. I'd be Craig Campbell. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? If once we recognize that, again, I keep hammering on as my bullet point for this fucking podcast. But I believe comedy is one of those tools that does that. It's universal. It's unifying. I get clips. I deliberately fuck with my meta, like For You sections to just get random shit because it always tries to box me in. So I end up with things like Indian stand-up comedy or whatever, and there'll be translation on the bottom, but you don't need the words. You can laugh because you feel the flow of it. You get the energy of the do you know what I mean? It's a universal thing. And I think without live comedy, all we're going to be left with is this hyper sanitized, over formulaic, inauthentic bullshit that's got just enough of like, oh, he referenced the funny thing I saw yesterday and it's enough of topical that it carries through like old Jay Leno material. It's just, oh yeah, that was in the purpose of this. It's just topical reference bullshit that never actually does a Carlin or a Hicks or somebody that actually goes like, let's peel back this shit. That's the real thing. And I feel we're losing that, man. We've already lost journalism. We've already lost most DJs and like voice, like radio jockeys and things like that. Podcasts, again, more people are censoring themselves towards monetization. So I think stand-up comedy, again, it's a place where it's not. Like so many, I'd like to get your opinion on this actually before I let you go. So many comedians now are using phone pouches. All right. The RFID blockers. And so when you go into like a big show, you get your own thing. You put your phone in the blocker and go into a locker so no one's got a phone.
Yeah, I'd only heard Chappelle doing that was my first introduction to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a company that's basically started from that. I'm trying to read on top of it, but it's this company have basically gone, we can do that, and so they're approaching stores. Wow. I think does Joe Rogan do it at the comedy UFO thing, whatever he's called, is his spot. But yeah, his spot down in Texas. I think they might do something similar. But I think it gets you into that. If I was recorded for everything I ever laughed at as jokes, the judgment you could place on me. You laughed at a dead baby joke. Yeah, but it was funny. Like here
you are laughing.
Like literally, and that can be spun into anything. And I think that if we don't then have that thing to hold each other accountable, and so the joy is going with a friend to a comedy club, a comedy event. They laugh and say something, and you go laugh, and they go ooh, and then you look at your friend. And there's this explosion in the vagus nerve, which is where we're talking about this reciprocal energies explosion. You get it just before you cry, almost an elation where it's fine, it's safe. We're not judging each other. It could be different opinions. You've laughed and you feel closer and bonded, and you get like, what do they call it? Fucking not epinephrine. What's the other thing I'm thinking of? Not endorphins.
Noradrenaline. Dopamine.
No, it's a sub hormone. I can't think. Oxytocin? I want to say oxytocin. Oh, yeah. Although that's some quite contentious science anyway. But yeah, that literally it's a bonding element. It's literally and you can look around. And like I said, I used to go to a lot of comedy gigs by myself. And so I'd have my social anxiety about the people, and I'd be worried about touching their knee and who's fighting over the armrest. But once we were laughing, you'd laugh together. You'd look at each other and you'd like almost you were friends. You wouldn't have that. It'd be like a surrogate experience if you'd laugh at how they're laughing. Like I love it when I'm sat next to like a 40s, mid 40s, 50-year-old wifey that's her first night out of the year. She's a little bit too drunk and she's got a cackle. That just does me every time. Then I'll laugh at the joke and then she's still cackling and I'll laugh again. Do you know what I mean? And
Sure.
there's just so much to it that I guess I'm not even I feel romanticizing here. I'm maybe feeling a bit what's the word? I'm mourning what I believe to be the comedy scene that I feel I was lucky enough to experience sort of over the
Okay.
10 years that I did. But yeah, I hope that it's not gonna.
Something that attracted me to the UK and many comedians from North America is the parallel with theater here. So you describing what is like audience anonymity is a great element. The audience should be in the dark. Whether it's because their phones are in Faraday cages or not, is that they should be a blank palette, and they should be free to release, as you're saying, their oxytocin, their emotional release in anonymity. They shouldn't feel the anxiety of being judged for their response and their reaction to the text. And that's something that but comedians also can work with it, like a Bill Burr works with that to his great advantage, where there's often division within his audiences because they have a level of popularity, but that popularity isn't always comfortable with his topic matter. So that division within the audience can work really well. Jerry Sadowitz is another one that does that. So even Frankie does that very well, Boyle. So that's I think there's varying environments and human organizational skills within those environments that create different audience experience. And you're experiencing like an other people's experience within the audience. I like that. I like the layers of that, and I like to work with that in my own shows. I like to tell stories where I'm telling the audience a story about another audience's response, and then I'm dealing with that new audience's response. And often that dovetails into other experiences of telling the original audience response to another group of people that I thought were also like-minded with myself, but they responded obtusely like the audience I'm described. So now I'm in like a second layer of like, no, I was making fun of them, and now you're responding like you were them. And that's what most like is the layer cake of and that again is autobiographical, which you now have, like you're mentioning with a Chappelle or with a Gervais. These people are now responding to their own response within the zeitgeist. And then so you're getting like that autobiographical comedic experience from, like, I considered, up until quite recently, I thought, Chappelle is like a prophet. He's up there for me with a Lenny Bruce. He's in that category. He's in a Carlin category now, and will forever be more immortalized because of that. So I think most recently, there's a lot going on with that I won't digress into. You're aware that I'm conspiracy minded, so we don't have to like go far off the trail there. But that's I think that's an enjoyable interface that we now have. These we now have to deal with a non-anonymous audience who feel that they, like you're talking, that they all have a voice. They're all Z-list celebrities. So we have to like digest their response in a group setting where other people feel like they're also as valid as the person on stage who's telling them the story. It's beyond, we're in, as I've said for many years now, Simpa, they killed farce. And they've killed absurdity, and they've killed parody, and they've killed satire. We're really in no man's land comedically. You know, they've really like murdered all of the different all of the different paradigms of the comedy. You know, the comedy pie has just been eviscerated, and you know, I think that's because there's truth in it. You and I both know that the actual target of the powers that be, if you know, whoever is censoring us, who we don't have to describe them. I call them they or them. They are attacking our ability to be candid and honest in the moment.
Mm.
Yeah, what a perfect way to tell time. We're both out of bed with.
Yeah. Perfect. I'll ask you my last question then, and we'll wrap this up because it's 4:20 as well. I suppose we spoke of a lot of things, a hell of a lot of subjects here, but I'm trying to replacing my questions somewhat. I used to ask everybody what does the future hold for you, but there's quite a few guests, probably yourself included, that I'll keep bringing back as we go because I really enjoy our banter, and I like exploring your beliefs without holding my own. I think it's always interesting to learn new things. So yeah, my new sort of end question is, what are we not talking about? What should we be talking about?
Wow. Well, I guess we touched on a little bit, but hope, I guess, is the big one. And you know, I'm a little bit of you can search a little bit for me on fasting forums and particularly the Dry Fasting Club. And I'm like, you know, I touched on it earlier in the conversation, Simpa, but I'm a minor miracle. And if I knew what I know now, you know, 15 years ago, or sorry, 2014, 10, 11 years ago about my own like health situation, my own like well-being, I wouldn't have needed, you know, several operations and I wouldn't have needed to tell audiences that I wouldn't be able to come back to them. And I wouldn't have, first of all, and foremost, had a great deal of pain and anguish in my life, actual physical pain and anguish, which I still have like grave discomfort right now as I'm speaking to you. That's why I'm like in an uncomfortable, probably to most looking position, laying on pillows because things, you know, furniture doesn't work for me anymore. I quite enjoy exploring that with audiences now, like people with arthritis, like, you know, you get comfortable on a chair and it's like, oh, okay, perfect. You know, I can sit like this for hours. Who made this chair? You know, it's like wonky, broken. There's only one leg on it. It's like, this is amazing. Who did, you know, because like things that have symmetry, I'm not symmetrical anymore. So I don't fit in a symmetrical, you know, furniture land. So, you know, to me, that's like kind of the greatest push that I think that we don't have. And I like when you talk about the guy in the Lamborghini or the, you know, people driving around in Porsches or people with piles of money or whatever. I just like, and including like particularly people in my own industry with successes that other people might be envious of. For me, the only thing that I'm envious of is other people's health. And in that way, I'm not envious of it at all because I'm in charge of my own health. And I would really push people to be aware of like some of the things that we've touched on in this conversation, you know, particularly fasting, to just look into like why you're feeding yourself, what you're feeding yourself, when you're feeding yourself, and know that your well-being beyond that is the most important thing in your life, because nothing that you try to achieve or attain beyond that, beyond your own well-being, is worth having if you're not able to enjoy it without painkillers, without you know, without needing attention, you know, medical attention. So like I look at people and they just have everything in the world, but they don't have their health. And to me, that just means that they have nothing. They literally have their prosperity and their enjoyment of life built on a bed of sand. And this is all within your fingertips. What has come across little things? Look up autophagy. Autophagy was awarded in 2016 the Nobel Prize, the recognition of the process. Basically, you know, it's Latin for self-eating, and it's what takes place at various stages. There's three different types of it, and three different types of autophagy that take place through your stages of abstinence or total fasting, as they call it. And it's your body just going in, as Simpa mentioned earlier. It goes in and it finds all of the malignancies, it finds all of the mutations. It basically burns up all that is not necessary. It goes into your house that is your body, you know, your temple, and it goes into the deepest darkest cupboards, including every nook and cranny of your brain, including your neural pathways, including all of your behavioral systems that is your brain through your neural pathways. And it takes away everything that isn't vital. That's what it burns first. When it has no food, when it has no water, it makes its own internally. One of the most insane things that takes place with dry fasting is you continue to piss. Day 5. Haven't had anything to drink, haven't had a sip of water, haven't had a shower, haven't brushed my teeth. And you wake up on day 5 of not eating or drinking anything. And you wake up just like you do every other day and you take a piss because your body is breaking down within yourself what's called metabolic water to make water that keeps you alive. So your body is, like they always say it, it's the healing mechanism, you know, the miracle that people never talk about. And the biggest miracle of it, and I have a laugh with some of my fasting friends, and you might appreciate it if you fast out there, when you talk with people about like how you made yourself better or certainly started your own healing journey, that you started to feel some of your symptoms allaying in any way, shape, or form, which is you getting better and which proves that you can get better, is that how do you do it? You do nothing. It's the most ridiculous thing ever. How did you do it? Nothing. What do you mean? I did nothing. I didn't eat and I didn't drink. I literally did nothing. Well, how did you heal yourself? I stared out the window and did little else. That's how I helped myself. And that's like, you know, you didn't need to like build a potion. You can go on anywhere, on whether it's Telegram or Facebook or wherever you look to for your medical information these days. You know, you can, you get some turmeric and you put it with honey and you put in some cinnamon and you stir that all up and you blend some ginger and you have that twice a day for 8 weeks or whatever. Or you could do nothing. Yeah. You could literally not put anything in your fridge. You could put nothing in your blender. You could stir nothing into your drink, and you could do nothing twice a day for the next lifetime. You could actually just do sweet F all every morning that you wake up for a couple of days in a row, and it will be the best thing that you did for yourself from anything that you could point out on the internet or on a shelf in a pharmaceutical shop to help yourself. So that's something. And again, you know, for comedians, there's nothing in this if you're not healthy when you get there. There's no reward at the end of it if you're not alive to enjoy that reward. And you know, whatever tiny bit of that you take from this conversation, it's not intended to be arrogant or, you know, I have self-belief, but I don't have, you know, the arrogance of knowing what's best for you. But what's worked best for me is making sure that tomorrow happens and that I look forward to it because I'm healthier than I was yesterday. And that's something that all of us have in our embrace within our fingertips. And I wish that for you. And I wish that for anybody who wants that for themselves.
Yeah. Beautiful, man. I think a great way to sort of to wrap this up. In my head there as a final thought was that Ben Franklin quote about a man who sacrifices his liberty for security deserves neither. And in my head was a paraphrase going, a man who sacrifices his health for success deserves neither. So yeah, take of that what you will, folks. I completely agree with Craig there that there's an old fucking documentary going around in my head at the end of it, and there's an interview with Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And he's sort of describing about like people being lonely, and he sort of says between a story of a man talking to God, and God goes to the man. He goes, well, you know, I don't have anybody else. There's just you. And in that sense, I take God to be yourself, and you only have you. You can choose to reach and speak to people and whatever else, but these are, in that power of now sense, these are the fleeting moments of now, but in every other moment will always be me. And if you can't find your own health, your own sanity, your own peace, again, be critical and analytical, folks. If you can't be proud of who you are or what you do, make a change. There's still always time. If you're 80, if you're 90, it doesn't fucking matter, man. Do something, because even if all it is you feel better tomorrow, as Craig says, that's a win. That's a fucking win. And you'd probably be less of a dick to the world. And if everyone could be slightly less of a dick, we'd all get along. Myself included. I take that. Myself included. Right, I've really enjoyed this, Craig.
Likewise.
I'll let you jump off, and yeah, I'll include sort of usual links below, and yeah, I'll be in touch before too long. I'll get you back in the hot seat and keep chatting these ideas out. Perhaps you can talk me out of the existence of nuclear next time.
What a great pleasure again to speak to you. All the best, and thanks to your listeners.
Yeah, peace and love. All right, bye. Well, there you go, folks. That was comedian Craig Campbell. Hope you enjoyed that podcast. I've kept you for a good 3.5 hours there. So anybody that's just earned their veteran achievement for going 3.5 hours solid there, big respect. It was a lot for us to sit through for 3.5 hours. Yeah, a lot of subject matter, incredible amount of conversations that we had. I feel I touched on every subject that I kind of wanted to. There's a few things that maybe I'd have liked to rebut or not rebut, maybe just have a response to and continue in that kind of hypothetical conversations. I was quite interested for a sort of belief on nuclear. I think nuclear, it's pronounced nuclear. Simpsons has ruined my brain. On sort of nuclear and that. So I think there's more to get into next time I get him back. I do quite enjoy getting into people with differing beliefs on the podcast. It's just nice to have these kind of flowing conversations where you can hear somebody present their argument and their beliefs. And I like to believe that I'm somebody that is, I'm quite strong-willed. I'm not necessarily, ignorant, I don't think. I will adapt and change to new information. I will learn and grow and evolve and adapt. But yeah, I just think there's some subjects that I just want to learn more about. I'm just curious. I'm just fascinated about. So yeah, we might get weird with some guests. I don't know. I'm just as always approaching anybody and everybody that I'd be interested in sitting for a couple of hours and having a good conversation with. So yeah, Craig is definitely one of those people, and I think as you saw there, we can talk for hours. So we'll be getting him back in the not too distant future, it would seem. Look through my notes there. Yeah, basically covered most things and a myriad of more things. So we're going to need some more questions for next time we see him, which is easy to do. Yeah, if you enjoyed this, folks, and you made it all the way through, or even if if you're hearing these words, then please do give us a like, a share, a subscribe, a comment. Let me know what you're thinking of the podcast. What guests do you want to see? What sort of topics, subjects do you want to see me tackle? I'm obviously going to always be within the remit of cannabis, drugs, human rights, and those kind of things, but I do like exploring the intersectionality of other sort of movements and issues within modern society. So yeah, suggestions always welcome. But yeah, please do give us a like, share, subscribe, thumbs up, star rating, whatever it is on your platform that you do to show appreciation. I greatly appreciate you for it. Check out simpalife.com, where you can read back catalogue of my Weed World articles, various other content that I've produced over the years. It's looking a bit laxed at the minute, but there is some content in the works and another project that I'm working on that will be, revitalizing that, shall we say. All right. Yeah, Patreon. I got a Patreon. Check out Patreon. Yeah, patreon.com/Simpa Life, where for less than a cup of coffee a week, you can help me keep the lights on this little project of mine. And yeah, that's everything I need to say, everything I need to do. I will let you go and be done. Get on with your lives. Till next week, folks, where we'll have, I don't know, somebody. You'll love it. I'll love it. It'll be awesome. All right. Peace and love. Be good to each other. Bye. That was good. That was good. We recording? We are recording. Oh, sweet. Sweet. Hey. Right. Let's finish this bitch. Let's go. Well, there you go, folks.